Your next news bulletin on Euronews is coming up in under 1 minute.
Hello there and welcome to Euronews, to this special live show, Germany Decides. I'm Maeve McMahon broadcasting from Brussels. Herzlichen Willkommen. Now it's just 5:30 local time and the polls are set to close shortly in Germany, where 60 million people were eligible to vote and choose 630 members of the 21st Bundestag. That's of course the German federal parliament. Now these snap elections were called early due to the collapse of the traffic light coalition last November. The election campaign was short, rather toxic and overshadowed by a number of lone wolf attacks, meaning migration and asylum became the all-dominating topic. But with a GDP worth over 4.3 trillion euros last year, Germany is the third largest economy in the world, the biggest in Europe. So whatever happens in Germany impacts us here in Brussels and all across the European Union and Eurozone. So stay with us here on Euronews for the next few hours to find out how the next German Parliament could look. Who will be the next Chancellor? What will this all mean for the direction of Germany over the next 4 years? And what will it mean for the European Union and policies crafted here in Brussels? For live analysis and updates through the show, we'll be heading over and back to the Euronews newsroom, where our analysts, Marit Gwynne-Jones and Stefan Grobe, are standing by for us. They'll be helping us break down the results in the 16 federal states, making sense of this very complex German electoral system. Good evening, Marit and Stefan.
Yes, Maeve, we'll be here throughout the night, bringing you all those live results as they roll in, crunching those numbers and helping you make sense of it all. We'll have that first exit poll at 6 p.m. Central European time, so do stay with us. But for now, back to you.
We're back to the capital of Germany, of Berlin, for constant updates and reactions from the headquarters of the main political groups. Our correspondents Liv Straud, Tamsin Paternoster, Diana Resnick and Matthias Huber are standing by for us. And to get the reactions here from Brussels and of course the European wide angle, I'm joined here in the Euronews studio by Klaus Strunz, that's Euronews' editorial director, who happens to come from Germany and has worked for decades in journalism and as a TV host. So you're in the right place at the right time.
Yes, it's a very, very exciting evening.
It is indeed, so stay tuned to Euronews, because I'm also joined here by some familiar faces from the European political arena, like Charles Michel, the former president of the European Council, former Prime Minister as well of Belgium, and a member of the centre-right Liberal Party, Amer. Welcome.
Good afternoon.
Great to have you with us.
Thank you.
And of course, as I said, stay with us for the European angle on this story, because we're also accompanied here in the studio by George Papandreou, former Prime Minister of Greece, a member of the Socialist PASOK Party, and also, by the way, General Rapporteur on Democracy for the Council of Europe.
Nice to be here.
Yeah, welcome back to Brussels.
Night.
Lovely to have you with us, and thank you as well to our viewers for being with us here. As I said, everything you need to know about these important elections, the Bundestag elections, and also for the European angle. We have a live blog on Euronews.com that will give you all the on-spot news and analysis. Keep an eye on that and also download our app. But for now, let's get some reactions here first from Klaus Strunz, because normally, Klaus, German politics can be very predictable and rather boring. But this campaign has been nothing but fascinating. What is your take? What are you looking out for tonight?
Yeah, I think the exciting moment tonight is whether we see a change from a social democrat chancellor to a conservative chancellor. So that means, in the words of international politics, from center left to center right. So Germany is in the same situation like almost every country in Europe. And the most decisive question this evening is how big will this shift be? And that it depends on the coalition Mr. Merz could do after these elections. And that will define everything. That will define the German internal politics, that will define the German European politics, and of course it will define, in a way, a worldwide situation, because Germany is always a big player.
It is a big player and traditionally has always been driving the European Union, but obviously we've had a couple of months of political paralysis, if you like. Charles Michel, what is your take? I mean, what's at stake here for the European Union?
One thing is absolutely certain, this was not boring at all, and we followed this electoral campaign, but for sure, you're absolutely right. Germany is an important economy in Europe and across the world. It has an impact. Germany is also a very important player in the decision-making process here in Brussels, very important, and we know that we face a lot of complex challenges. It will require, in the months to come, many bold decisions, I think, and it's absolutely clear that the choices that will be made today in Germany will have an effect in Germany, will have a huge impact at the European Union's level as well.
And that's why the election has been watched nervously here from the Belgian capital of Brussels. Regarding voter turnout, it's been a very nice day in Germany today. The weather's good. Voter turnout as well is high. Good signs for democracy, regardless, of course, of the outcome tonight.
Obviously, voter turnout is a very essential part of the democracy, although I would say that we sometimes look at the institutional side of democracy, and we have to see that how we have seen powers developing, and this is one of the issues that I've been dealing with in the Council of Europe, where whether it's the major issues of climate change or the insecurity people feel in the AI world, the social media platforms which have taken over the public space and the debate, the huge inequalities which we've seen over the past 10, 15 years, particularly after the financial crisis, all these have impacted. And not only that, but they have shifted the power locus from government to many private powers. Let's take the US. It's basically an oligarchy right now. I'll be very blunt. A plutocracy. So we are seeing it's the undermining of democracy. So even though you have the actual voting, which goes well, then where is the real power? And I think this is a big issue for democracy today.
And later, of course, we'll dive into that topic, which is the role of big tech and the various apps, the role they played as well in these elections. But for now, let's head back over to Euronews newsroom, where Euronews analysts Mara Dwin-Jones and Stefan Grober are standing by to set the scene for us tonight and give us a glimpse as well of the latest exit polls. Over to you.
Yeah, good evening, Maeve, and to your guests in the studio. To kick it off, I want to give you some numbers to warm you up and to illustrate how age-defining this election may be. Let's talk about the electorate. So we have 59.2 million voters. That's 2 million less than 4 years ago. We have 2.3 million first-time voters, so youngsters who were too young to vote 4 years ago. That's down by 500,000. And these numbers tell you about the demographic developments in Germany. The German society is aging, the German society is shrinking, and another number, 40% of the electorate, 40% are 60 years and older. So this is a huge challenge for the social security systems in Germany. It's a big challenge for Germany's economy. It's a big challenge for everybody who works there for German prosperity, etc. That's why this election is so important. And of course, nothing is simple in Germany, especially the electoral system. And Marit, why don't you fill us in here about the principles of the German electoral system?
Well, it's quite a big ask, Stefan, because the German electoral system is, as you know, notoriously complex. We are here, though, to help break everything down for you. So German voters will today have 2 votes on their ballot papers. The first is for a candidate running in their electoral district, and that's based on what we call first past the post. So the candidate with most votes in a given district should get a seat in the Bundestag. Now, the second vote on the paper is the important one for us tonight. It's for a political party, and it determines how the Bundestag seats are distributed between the parties based on proportional representation. I do hope you're following so far. But Stefan, there's an important rule we should mention, which is the 5% rule.
Hurdle.
So essentially, a party needs to get 5% of the vote to guarantee representation in the Bundestag. So that's quite an important number for tonight. There are other ways. For example, if they get 3 directly elected candidates in the districts, they can also ensure that representation. But in any case, the 5% hurdle is going to be crucial tonight. Let's take a look at why, because we do have the opinion polls. Of course, this is based on pre-election surveys, but it does give us a little bit of a glimpse of how German voters have been thinking, have been feeling ahead of the election. And Stefan and I will talk you through these polls right now, because they do give us quite a nice sense of what the vote could look like, because they've been very, very stable, unusually so, perhaps, Stefan, over the
Yeah,
past few
absolutely.
months.
So what we're seeing here is the latest public polling that came out yesterday. And we see here in black, a familiar color, the Christian Democrats under the leadership of Friedrich Merz at around 30%. The AfD second, that is the far-right party, already represented in the Bundestag. Never a big player in Germany, but who knows, maybe next, polling at around 20%. In red, the Social Democrats, the party of Chancellor Olaf Scholz, only polling at 15%. That would be a historic negative result. A little less the Greens here, and then that is a bit of a surprise. The Linke, the left, that is kind of a spin-off of the former ex-communist. They merged and remerged and were renamed the Linke. Now polling at 7.5%, which means they would make it into the Bundestag. For the rest, it's the political death knell, especially for this upstart here, 5%. BSW, that's the Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht. Sarah Wagenknecht being a left politician, she was member of parliament for Die Linke until 2023. Until she founded her own party. So,
as you can see, a battle for survival there for the 5%. We will have more insights for you very soon, so do come back to us. But for now, back to you, Maeve.
You will indeed. Thank you so much, Marit Gwyn Jones and Stefan Grobe there for having their finger on the pulse and breaking down very eloquently the very complex system there on the 2 votes, etc. And also giving us a hint as well of the surprises that we should be looking out for tonight with the spike in popularity there of Die Linke, perhaps thanks to Heidi Reichen's recent popularity on social media platforms. But of course, we're in Brussels tonight, but the story is in Germany, and that is where we can head over tonight now to Berlin, the capital, where our correspondent Liv Straud is standing by at the headquarters of the CDU. Great to see you there. Thank you so much for being with us there, live from the Conservative Christian Democrats headquarters. The polls, of course, as we see there, are saying that the CDU and their sister party, the CSU, will come out on top. So I imagine that members there behind you have a spring in their step tonight. They're feeling pretty confident. What's the atmosphere like?
Thank you very much, Maeve. Well, as you can see behind me, it is absolutely packed in the Christian Democratic headquarters this evening. The mood is jubilant, people are excited. It looks like the CDU is going to come out on top according to the latest polls, and the people are looking pretty happy, if they can all get in, that is, of course. The queue is going right down the street this evening.
So it's almost like a political festival there, Liv Strauss. I can see you're almost getting shoved around there by various people trying to get in. That's obviously the place to be tonight in Berlin. But just in case our viewers are not familiar with the Spitzenkandidat, so the lead candidate of the CDU, Friedrich Merz, tell us about the man poised to perhaps be the next Chancellor of Germany.
So Friedrich Merz is a former corporate lawyer who came to power. He was elected leader of the CDU in 2022. He supports a more conservative policy, and it's likely that he will water down more green climate policies in regards to policies that will prioritise competitiveness for Germany. Obviously, Germany at the moment has a very weakened economy, and that's what the voters are looking for, a strong economy.
Thank you so much, Liv Strauss. We'll be back to you a little bit later, but thank you so much for that live report there from Berlin, from the headquarters of the CDU, where indeed the story perhaps is unfolding tonight. George, I want to bring you in there, of course, because you were kind of frowning slightly when you heard about the various policies that Friedrich Merz represents and the policies he could be bringing in if, of course, he managed to couple together a coalition. Your reaction?
Well, I think what Charlotte was saying earlier, these are policies that not only have to do with Germany, but it's the future of Europe. And we are facing major challenges and major disruptions in the world. If we see the geopolitics of what's happening, and of course Ukraine, Russia, US-China relations, but US-Europe relations particularly. So we have to find a strategy which is more autonomous. We want to be friends with the United States, but I think we should not be dependent any longer on it. They have lost, in many ways, our trust by the way they've dealt with us in the recent period. Defense is one major issue. Energy, also to be autonomous in energy, not dependent. Areas of building up, of course, our infrastructure, which will be both energy and AI, and areas of digital, so which we can be able to compete. And of course, we need to look at some of the public goods. Charles here had to deal with a very important time with COVID, and with the where I think Europe did show that when we work together, we can actually be quite strong. And I think we need to bring back the confidence in Europe. When we work together, we can deal with these issues, and that I think is what we need to bring. And hopefully, whatever government comes out of this election here, we will be able to help bring back confidence in the possibilities of Europe.
Is it like the momentum is gone around the EU table? What energy will Friedrich Merz bring, do you think?
No, I've the impression that we all know that we face two big challenges in Germany and in Europe. The first one is the economic development. We need more competitiveness. We need to support more innovation across the EU. We have to strengthen our economic basis all across the EU. And Germany is playing and will play a very important role in the future in that matter, point one. And at the same time, in parallel, we face new challenges related to our security and our defense. And here the role that will be played by Germany will be crucial. We have seen in the past, following the full-scale invasion launched by Russia against Ukraine, that the German authorities made a very clear choice in favor of more investment in the field of defense. But the question will be, how do we invest in defense? Do we invest in defense and at the same time we try to strengthen our European industrial base, or we think that we have to invest only to support others and other industrial businesses? And it's a crucial choice that you have to make. And here, this is absolutely clear, in my opinion, that the coalition in Germany after the elections, this coalition will have a very important impact on these kinds of fundamental decisions for the future of Germany and for the future of the European Union.
And you mentioned the industrial decline. Of course, all eyes this week on the European Commission as they present their Clean Industrial Act. Lots at stake, of course, for industry now. And many in Germany, many voters perhaps tonight, those who voted for CDU, they're looking at the government, they're looking at Brussels to start slashing regulation, bureaucracy, and start making it much easier to do business.
Yeah, in a way, it's a kind of core business of Friedrich Merz, because it's interesting to analyze this guy just a little bit more. Liv did it already very well, but the interesting thing is that he is seeing himself as a European. That's really good news. He is seeing himself as an heir of Helmut Kohl and Konrad Adenauer, not as an heir of Angela Merkel or Social Democrats. He is totally clear this is his point of view of Europe. That's good news for the city and for Europe. And if you see what Germany did in the last 10 or 15 years in the politics, you see Germany did three major miscalculations. First, cheap energy from Russia. That was a conviction in Germany. Putin is a reliable partner, and it was a misunderstanding, honestly said. The second one was the US will protect us in every time. Hopefully they do, but there are some different opinions on the table right now. And the second is China will be our future market. And Friedrich Merz now has, from my perspective, the task to deal with these three things, with these three preconditions, and to come up with interpretations from a European point of view. Because only with the European point of view, only with the power of Europe, we can solve these things in a good way.
No, I fully agree on this assessment that's made by Klaus, but it means that there will be another difficult challenge, I think, in Germany. This is the way the German authorities in the future, after those elections, they will deal with the question of the financial solidarity within the European Union. Because usually, around the table of the European Council, you can see some divisions, and the divisions are related to how do we use our money on the one hand, and how do we make sure that we use it in the right way. This is always a very sensitive and difficult political debate. And here, I think that in the months to come, when the members of the Council, together with the Commission and the Parliament, they will have to deal with the next multi-annual framework, the next European budget, it will be a moment of truth. We know what are the challenges ahead of us, point one, and because those certainties from the past are put into question in Germany and maybe all across the EU, it means that new answers will be needed, in my opinion.
Well, all eyes, of course, on Friedrich Merz to see if he, when and if he becomes Chancellor, can come up with those solutions fairly fast. But, George, let's take a listen now as we head over to the headquarters of the Socialist Party, the SPD, tonight, where our reporter, Tamsin Paternoster, is standing by for us. Tamsin, thank you so much for being with us. As I said, you're at the headquarters tonight of the Socialist Party. What is the mood like there? Probably not so joyful.
Yes, Maeve. So I'm at the Willy Brandt house, that is the headquarters of Olaf Scholz's Social Democrat Party. Now, they haven't been doing particularly well in the polls. They had around 14 and 16%, which, if confirmed, will be a historically bad result for this party. Nevertheless, party members are confident. Olaf Scholz said over the weekend that they're really counting on those last-minute undecided voters. According to Scholz, around 1 in 5 German voters was undecided as of this weekend. So they're really hoping that these voters will come in last minute and bring the SPD's score up.
Well, of course, Tamsin, the polls are still open for just a couple more minutes until 6. But what have members there been saying to you tonight? Are they disappointed that Olaf Scholz decided to front this campaign, to be the actual Spitzen candidate? Was that a mistake, perhaps? What are you hearing?
So none of the party members have come out explicitly and said that it was a mistake. I think that would be quite strong language, but you can't forget that before this election campaign even started, there were calls from within the party, quite loud calls, on whether Olaf Scholz was the best person to be at the front of the party. Many people in the party thought that Boris Pistorius, the defence minister, would have been a better candidate. So it's definitely something to keep an eye out for tonight if the SPD don't do as well as they anticipate or as they want to do, whether calls for Olaf Scholz to consider his role in the party will get louder.
Okay, Tamsin Paternoster there reporting for us live from the Socialist headquarters. Thank you so much for that live update. Do stay there. We'll be back to you a little bit later. But now we can head over to the headquarters of the AfD, Alternative for Deutschland, to check in with our correspondent, Diana Resnick, who is standing by for us. Good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. The polls say it could be a very good night for the AfD. They could be doubling compared to what they got in the elections a couple of years ago. What's the atmosphere like where you are? What have people been saying?
Yes, hello. People are very cheerful. People are excited. You can literally see the excitement in their faces. That's no wonder. The AfD so far has the result of 22%, 1% more than initially expected, and double as much as in the last elections in 2021. Amazing results. This is due to their rhetoric about migration mostly. Germany was shattered by awful, terrible attacks in the past weeks. We just think about the knife attack in Aschaffenburg, where a little child and a man were killed by an Afghan asylum seeker. We think about the car attack in Munich, where also an Afghan asylum seeker crashed into a crowd, killing a mother and her child. And we think about the terrible car crash in Magdeburg just before Christmas, where a Saudi Arabian man, a doctor, crashed into a crowd, killing 6 people and injuring 300 people. People in Germany are very shocked by this, afraid of and very concerned with the migration topic, and this is what the AfD has achieved. Their promise a harsh migration rules in Germany, and people are buying this.
But of course, there's a number of attacks as well on asylum seekers and migrants in Germany, the very hostile atmosphere as well, perhaps for them. But just because here in Brussels, taking a look at the success of the AfD, some here are pretty shocked to see such a nationalist party do so well given their history. What do you think their success is based on, and will their victory tonight be short-lived given that nobody really wants to go into government with them?
Yes, that is true. Nobody really wants to go into government with them. The candidate for Chancellor of the CDU, Friedrich Merz, also explicitly stressed that he tried to bring through a rule where which the AfD supported, where he wanted stricter migration, and he was very highly criticized for that by other MPs and by citizens. Germans went to the streets and protested against this crack of the firewall, as it was called. Yet polls say that around 50% of Germans still would like to see the CDU working with the AfD, and thought this decision that they had together would be a good idea in the future. About the influence of the AfD on real politics so far, because no one wants a coalition with them, might be limited, but their influence is there, and it's mostly agenda setting. As I said, they promised stricter migration rules, and people really want that, as they're really afraid of what just happened to the country. So you can imagine why they are very successful. This is one reason. Another reason is they have a very strong social media presence and very strong support also from, for example, US tech billionaire Elon Musk, who had a live interview with their candidate for Chancellor, Alice Weidel, on X. And of course, this helped them also to popularize more and more their agenda.
Okay, Diana Resnick, thank you so much for that live update there from the headquarters of the AfD party tonight. We can digest a couple of those points that Diana and also Tamsin made now with our guests, starting perhaps picking up on what we heard from the Socialist Party. Not going to do very well tonight. It could be a lot of soul-searching then for your party.
Definitely, although I would say that Olaf Scholz was quite a good chancellor. If you think about the challenges he had in Ukraine particularly, he was balanced but also strong on these issues. But certainly, I think the issues that Germany is facing, the internal issues, which you mentioned, Klaus, of course, on the competitiveness, the thinking that China would always be a market, and now they are competing with German automobiles or the legacy industries which are not moving into digital, so automobile and chemical companies being the basic lagging behind, basically, because in the world of this technological change, and of course the issue of energy, very, very important. I would add, of course, that what I would like to see is something which Charles mentioned earlier. How do we finance a different Europe? Because these challenges will need to be financed, whether it's defense, whether it is the energy transition to climate, whether it is public goods, such as we can do work together for public procurement, which was done during COVID. And I have at times talked about Eurobonds, of course, and I know that's a taboo issue. But I remember even talking to Angela Merkel then in the past, and I said, okay, you don't want Eurobonds to be used for debt, for the deal of debt in Greece, but Eurobonds could be used to invest. And at the time, we could have borrowed negative interest rates as a European Union. And I even suggested, let's invest in energy for grids to link our single market, both digitally, which you need for energy, and of course with energy. And I think these are the areas where we need to think of.
And what did she say to you? What did Angela Merkel say that?
She said that, well, not in energy. But I hadn't thought of the Russian connection at the time. It wasn't a geopolitical discussion. But now, of course, after the fact,
so naive, right?
After the fact, of course, that was the issue. But I believe that we now need to do this, and this is a big leap. I'm not saying it's an easy thing, but this is a Europe we need to have, and we did create, because of the Greek crisis, the European Stability Mechanism. Well, that combined with the money that the EIB has could be about 1 trillion.
Indeed. I was going to mention the EIB. We do have the European Investment Bank.
So there is the possibility if we decide on this. And don't forget, the U.S. in the beginning of the previous century had about a 1% GDP central government. But then they had a war, the First World War and the Second World War. And now it's up to 25% GDP as the central federal government. We still have 1%, but we have these challenges. We have to, I think, build this budget up if we really want to unify Europe.
And those challenges were articulated very clearly in the Mario Draghi report that a lot of people in Brussels have read, even though in Davos this year at the World Economic Forum, people were laughing, I understand, at Mario Draghi's report, saying, this is common knowledge. Why did the EU have to commission this report when these are facts that we already knew? He said we need to invest billions to make this project move forward, as George Papandreou outlined. What is your response to this?
First, I think that there are three very simple questions we face. First, what do we want to do together at the European Union's level?
Yes.
Second, how do we pay? And how do we organize the financial solidarity?
More difficult question.
Yeah, and three, how do we decide together? These are the three fundamental questions.
And what are the fundamental answers?
And I will give my answer. At the financial level, I think solidarity means not only more support for those in need, it means also that those in need have to put in place some measures to improve the labour market, to reform the pension system, and this is fair to make sure if we make the decision together to invest much more European money because we think that we have some common projects, because we have a common destiny, then it is fair that we consider the solidarity it works on two tracks, point one. And point two, I firmly believe that the European Investment Bank is a very powerful tool, and I'm absolutely convinced that sooner or later the debate will be the recapitalization of the European Investment Bank. Why? Because this bank could give the guarantees that the money is used in the right way for productive investment, for useful investments in the field of energy, innovation, digital transition, or in the field of defense and security. And that's why this is not the first time that I advocate, but I'm absolutely convinced that this will be the choice we'll have to make. And I think that the debates over the summer around the financial topics will be the occasion to make steps in that direction. But for sure, the result in Germany will have an impact on such a debate.
But we're talking about these German elections tonight. We're talking about how Germans just voted today as well. And we have to take into account how many people did vote for the AfD, Alternative for Deutschland, a party which is not interested in any of these conversations we're having now around the table, a highly Eurosceptic party. They're proposing a nation state. They're also proposing to close borders, even though Germany is a country with 9 land borders. That's the reality, Klaus, on the streets of Germany. People want solutions and they want them fast.
Yeah, and I think it's a matter of priorities. Like whenever it comes down to politics and to decision making, you have to sort out your priorities. And if a lot of people in the country fear for their lives or don't feel secure, then it's a little bit difficult to discuss matters 1 year, 2 years, 5 years from now, because you need an urgent thing. And that's what we can see here. And I want, before I maybe come back to AfD, just give an answer to Olaf Scholz, because I ask myself tonight, it's maybe the end of his era as a chancellor. And what kind of figure, historical figure, he maybe is in the bigger context. And I disagree just a little bit with you, because I think he is an icon for a current phenomenon for missing leadership. Because Olaf Scholz is a kind of administrator. He can deal with things. If you maybe should give your tax report, you should show it to him, because he will go through it and he will ever the little notes.
He's a technocrat.
Yeah, but he showed in his chancellery a lack of leadership, and so that's what Friedrich Merz should bring to the table. And that's a connection between the both things. If there is a leader who wants to bring leadership to the table, it's much easier to sort out your priorities, because then somebody has to say, in my priority list is this, maybe defense, number one, because we are threatened, and something like that. And then it starts a debate. And the strong politician then has arguments and can inspire other people. You know it, huh?
Yes, of course. But you do have, it was a coalition government, of course, and that could also, Klaus, be one of the problems of how you get the coalitions to actually build on these priorities.
Just on that point, it is just gone 6, and I understand that we do have the first exit polls of these snap federal Bundestag elections that we can show up there on your screen right now and tell you that as it stands now at just after 6 o'clock, we can take a look. I understand that we can bring in our analysts, Stefan Krobe and Mairead Gwynne-Jones as well, who will break them down for us. The CDU up on top there, followed by the AfD, then the SPD, followed by the Greens, and then the left, Die Linke, and the yellow, and then the Alliance for Sarah Wagenknecht underneath. So yeah, what's your first impressions there, Claes?
So it's a not a very good day for Friedrich Merz, because when he's under 30%, it's a kind of defeat. It's better than the last time, but not big enough. It's the discussed thing with the AfD. 20% means doubling the result from last time. And for me, for the future of Germany, in a way, the 5% of the liberals is a very crucial data, because if they will be in the next parliament, it gives Friedrich Merz the possibility to do a coalition with the Social Democrats and the Liberals. And that's, in Germany, there are some people who are in favor of it, because it's like black, red and yellow, which is called the Deutschland, the Germany coalition. And that's on the table now, but with 4.9, it's over.
That's on the table. Maybe, Charles Michel, you can bring in a reaction. You're obviously cousins of the FDP, the pro-business party, the Free Democrat Party.
No, indeed. With this result, we'll see what are the possible coalition, because after those results, we need to know what are the seats, because the seats will be key to make a coalition agreement. But this is absolutely clear that those results are not so far from the latest poll, on the one hand, with this fact that indeed CSU is not as high as expected for them, I think.
And indeed, as Klaus said, it will be more challenging now for Friedrich Merz. He didn't do as well as he would have liked to. And the AfD there on 20%. George Papandreou.
Well, I think we are seeing that the issue of migration and refugees has become a slogan for the ultra-right. It's not that it's not an issue. It is an issue, and we have to be open to discuss it. I think it should be a shared challenge rather than a partisan weapon to get power, and I think the ultra-right is using it. It's more like when you go into a dark room, you put a flashlight on a problem rather than turning on the lights to really see the whole context and all the priorities, which we're talking about right now. Yes, we do need to talk about it. It's a dilemma, because on the one hand, Germany needs, many countries need migrant workers, on the one hand. On the other hand, and of course we don't want them dying in the sea, in the Mediterranean, but at the same time, it is difficult when you have different cultures, when they become ghettos, when some schools feel disadvantaged, and of course if you have crimes, even though there may be more crimes against migrants in many of these countries, these become very iconic and very symbolic, and of course they're terrible. And this is exploited by this. I think I would
of
say
course the leader
ultra-right
of that party
loves to keep this problem alive. I would like to see shared challenges working together, thinking about
and
how
Alice
we solve
Weidel
it.
is the head of the AFD, and she's actually speaking live now to her supporters, and we can take a listen. Well, Alice Weidel there, the head of the AFD, gave a very short hello to her viewers, but perhaps we can just discuss her and the fact that she became the Spitzenkandidat here, Klaus. She managed to lure a lot of voters to her. And as we heard just last week at the Munich Security Council, she had 30 minutes face-to-face with J.D. Vance, the US Vice President, even though Alice Weidel and the AFD weren't invited to the Munich Security Conference based on their values, which are contrary to the values of the European Union.
Yes, on the other hand, she had really, really sad performances in the campaign because she was not knowing about the facts, about the numbers of economic things and something like that. So I think she's in a way a puppet of a phenomenon, of a party, and the internal view on her in the AfD is exactly like this, because she's tolerated, because she obviously has success. If you see here this result again, 20% means they doubled the size. And when I see the 12% of the Greens, there is another interesting thing on the table right now, because if Friedrich Merz cannot work together with the Liberals because they maybe will not make it to the parliament, he needs the Social Democrats and the Greens for a coalition. And that would mean that it's a red-green coalition with a conservative chancellor. And then the change a lot of people want, more than half of the people, more than 50% of the people showed in this election they want to change something, they want to change, they will be very disappointed. And there are a lot of analysts in Germany and experts in Germany and around Europe, they say, if this will happen, then we will watch AfD numbers next time above 30%.
And tomorrow, I imagine, in Brussels, the official reactions from the EU institution will be to congratulate the winners and perhaps not realise what Klaus said there, the amount of people who did support the AfD, a party that is very much against this town and everything it represents.
No, two points. First, AfD and this result. In fact, this is in line with what we have seen recently all across the European Union. In many countries, the last electoral campaigns were occasion for those parties to make more progress. Point one. And this is a challenge because it means that indeed we have to tackle those challenges to make sure that we bring concrete solutions in the field of migration and in our security. For instance, point one. Point two, if I would follow what you said, Klaus, and if it would be a coalition together with the Greens and the Social Democrats, it would mean that it would be very difficult for Friedrich Merz to show the visionary leadership you were mentioning earlier, because it means that he would be forced to negotiate everything with two parties with different opinions in terms of how we need to make measures for more economic development, how we need to guarantee the social cohesion of the society, for instance.
And if the numbers are like the numbers right now, then it's really worse for him because he has 28 and Reds and Greens together have 28 too. So then they will use their power in the coalition to let's call it like to celebrate checks and balances.
Yeah, and if this is the case, this is not great news because whether you like or you don't like this coalition, it would mean that there would be a leader in Germany without a strong legitimacy because of the difficulties within the internal coalition.
And that will create more chaos politically and economically because, of course, the financial markets as well are keeping a very close eye and hoping for stability as well to come out of Germany. Let's just bring in our analysts, Mairead Gwynne-Jones and Stefan Krobe, who are over in the Euronews newsroom tonight, digesting and crunching all the numbers as they get them. Over to you.
Yes, Maeve, let's take a closer look at that all-important exit poll. We've been digesting it here. We'll also show you what it means for potential coalition talks. Now, the CDU, CSU, the centre-right bloc, 28.5%, as we were expecting, coming out on top. The Alternative für Deutschland, AfD, on 20%, that means potentially doubling its number of seats in the Bundestag. We know no party will want to work on it to govern, but it does mean it becomes increasingly difficult to ignore it in the Bundestag. SPD, a very disappointing night for Olaf Scholz's party at 16.5%. The Greens here on 12%. Die Linke, the left-wing party, a dramatic upsurge in votes, and in the last minute, it seems, of this campaign, they've reached 9%. Some were questioning whether they would even reach that 5% benchmark. And we have here, and do note this is an exit poll, these could shift. And there are some indications that perhaps the pro-business liberal FDP might be just beneath that 5% mark. The same goes for Bundesrat Wagenknecht, really fighting for survival now as they try to secure that 5% hurdle. Stefan, talk us through this, and what does it mean for these coalition talks?
Well, absolutely. Well, first of all, when I look at these charts here, this is we've rarely seen in the past such a powerful, such a colorful Bundestag. So many parties represented. Well, in two cases, not yet. But this is quite extraordinary. This looks like an election in Italy or in Belgium, Charles-Michel. I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but let's take a closer look. We're talking about the expectation game until today. And look at the CDU under Friedrich Merz, 28.5%. That's below 30%. So, and it has been mentioned that this can be considered as a loss for him. Many of the rank and file of the CDU said, why, if we're facing such an unpopular chancellor, why is our candidate not, skyrocketing 30% plus? No, he's not. He's 28.5%. The AfD expectation game, they thought they would get 20% plus. Also, especially over the last few days with the support of Elon Musk, etc. No, but they're stuck at 20%, which is, of course, a big win compared to 2021, but it doesn't help them at all. Now, the Social Democrats, 16.5%. We know that this would be coming. It's actually a little higher than what we were expecting, but we have to digest this. This is the party of Willy Brandt, of Helmut Schmidt, of Gerhard Schröder. 16.5% is a historically catastrophic result for the Social Democrat. This is the oldest party in Germany, in Europe, founded in the 1860s. A disastrous result at probably the end of the political career of Olaf Scholz. The Greens, 12%, they expected more. Now, together we have one bloc, the current government, teaming up with the Christian Democrats that will very likely be the next government. And one more word here, we were saying, again, expectation game, that all these smaller parties were hovering around 5%. Well, look at this. Die Linke, almost 10%. FDP, 5%, that's a rounded number, and 5% also for the Bundesrat Wagenknecht, 5%. We don't know whether this will be valid at the end of the night. Well, we'll keep you updated, Maeve.
You will indeed. Thank you so much, Stefan Kobe and Marit Gwynne-Jones there for those updates and for keeping us nicely informed. But now we can bring in our first guest connecting us with us tonight, Silvana Koch-Marin. She's the former Vice President of the European Parliament, a former member of the Free Democratic Party of Germany, and she's also the founder of the Women in Parliament. That's a global forum, a worldwide network of female politicians. So thank you so much for joining us tonight on this special show where we're digesting the first exit polls that have just come out. What is your take so far on what you have heard there?
Well, it's going to be a long night because it's really critical to understand, will those small parties, the Liberal Party, the Bundesrat Wagenknecht, will they get in? Because if they do, then it might be not so easy to form a coalition with just two parties. So this is because as they are around 4.7, 4.8, 4.9, according to the first prognosis, this can be anything's possible, basically. But one thing is clear, Merz will be Chancellor and the coalition as we had it is over.
And as the former Vice President of the European Parliament, a convinced pro-European, how are you digesting the news of the success of the AfD party tonight?
Well, it is, of course, an alarm bell. And what we need to see is how we are able to answer the concerns that lead to voting for the AfD without falling into the same rhetoric of hate and division. We see this in other European countries, for example, Denmark, which has a very solid center government and which has a policy that I believe would be an answer to many of the concerns that German voters have. So that is, I think, one of those to-dos that the next government has. See how to end this toxic and hate speech and divisive policies that the AfD proposes, but nevertheless get action done so that the concerns are answered.
And meanwhile, I also introduced you as the head of the Women in Parliament, a global forum to promote women in politics. We have seen Friedrich Merz, whilst campaigning, saying that he'd be encouraged to have more women than men, even as cabinet members. Do you believe that he could make good on this promise?
Well, this would be wonderful because the number of elected women in his party is significantly lower than in the last term. And the Bundestag as such will probably have much less women members of parliament because AfD is so strong, very few women despite the woman at the head of the party. So it's a global rollback that we're seeing in many elections, and in Germany, unfortunately, the same. So if he makes up for this decline of women parliamentarians by having more women in government, I'd be all in favour.
And just one final question. What has it meant that Germany has been economically and politically paralysed over the last while? What has it meant for the functioning of Brussels, of the EU, and this whole mountain that needs to move?
Germany, of course, is the biggest economy in Europe, and in many ways, together with France, it's the motor of political integration. And this was lacking in the last few years. And the international attention that's paid to this election in Germany just shows the significance and how everybody's waiting for Germany to get back on track and to assume this leadership role in and with European partners to get back on track and also answer those geopolitical questions and demands from across the Atlantic.
Okay, all waiting for Germany to get, quote, back on track. Silvana Koch-Mehren there, the former Vice President of the European Parliament, a member of the FDP, so affiliated, of course, as well with your party, Charles Michel. Thank you so much for being with us here live on the show. We'll be back to you a little bit later. But for now, if you've just joined us, you're live on Euronews watching Germany Decides. We're taking a look at the outcome of those federal Bundestag elections that took place, snap elections that were called just before Christmas when that so-called traffic light coalition government collapsed. I believe we can bring you some figures now onto the screens and take a look at what the first predictions of the actual Bundestag could look like. Because as you heard earlier, this is a rather complex electoral system. Germans were asked today to vote twice, one for a candidate and then as well for a party. So as we look at those figures, we can take a glimpse of potentially how the Bundestag could look. The Bundestag then will have to, of course, elect the Chancellor of Germany, the driver of the EU's biggest member state. It could be indeed Friedrich Merz, but he would have to, of course, cobble together a coalition. We're taking a look at those numbers with our guests here in the studio: George Papandreou, former Prime Minister of Greece; Charles Michel, former Council President; and Klaus Strunz, our editorial director here at Euronews. George Papandreou, your reactions there to what you can see on that pie chart?
Well, as Klaus said, and he knows the politics, the internal politics and possibilities. The coalition building is a difficult task. And it is important for Europe, I will put it in the European context, because we are facing the types of challenges where we don't have a lot of time to react to some of the immediate issues that are facing us, such as Ukraine, for example.
And can I ask you a question? What would you suggest the Socialists do tonight? Do you think they should go into government, or do you think they should stay on the sidelines in opposition?
Well, it's always been controversial within the Socialist Party, and I think they sometimes will go to a internal referendum, and they may do this possibly. I think they can do that quite quickly. I think they will realize that the importance of being able to form a government is very important, both for Germany, for Europe, and I would say for the world, as things are doing now. And in this cases, this is not a normal time. This is not as easy period in history, this is a time when we have to look and see what our goals are. Now, of course, that means that there has to be a program that they can all agree on. Let's hope it is a European program because, as you said, Merz is a pro-European, so are the Social Democrats, so are the Greens, if they are also in the coalition. So I think this is something which, and of course, if FDP does come in, that's a different case. So I think
thoughts on FDP? What should they do, and what does the future for Christian Lindner look like? That's the head of the.
First, I think that we will have to wait for the final results and what will be the distribution in terms of seats. But what we see now gives the impression that a coalition with two parties is not possible, will not be possible. It means that a third party would be needed. It makes more difficult the negotiations to form a coalition. But indeed, because of the global challenges, I hope that political parties will assume their responsibilities and will make sure that at the European Union's level, decisions are made and decisions are possible. And I agree on the fact that probably the political campaign was very controversial at the domestic level, at the internal level. But I have the impression that between CDU, CSU on the one hand and SPD on the other hand, on the European matters, it's easier, it's less difficult. I don't see this will be absolutely easy, but it should be easier to find some common opinions. And indeed, I have one fear for Germany and for Europe tonight. This is the fact that I have this experience. When a political party loses the elections, sometimes it needs time to digest the result. And I hope that very quickly there will be a clear signal that the political parties are ready to negotiate, to start negotiation talks, and to make some compromises. It will be needed.
And that's what voters want, of course, because voter turnout, we're hearing, was historically high as well. But let's head straight over now to Berlin, to the headquarters of the AfD. That's the Alternative for Deutschland, where our correspondent is standing by with a guest to bring in some reactions from how people are feeling there. Diana, over to you.
Yes, hello. We have Beatrix from Storch. Thank you so much for agreeing to give us to answer a few questions. So I would like to know, Friedrich Merz excluded the possibility of working with the AfD, of building the coalition of the AfD. At the same time, we see the AfD is the second strongest party. How do you plan to implement your agenda?
Well, what we've done in the past that will be ongoing now is we're dominating the debate. So the issues which are our main issues, mass migration and economy and energy policy, these are the main issues which will be debated in the time to come. And we can see the outcome of this election is very, very clear. There would be a good majority for a coalition from CDU and AfD. This is what the people want politically. They want what we have in our program, what is the same that Friedrich Merz was promising to deliver after the election. But everyone knows he is unable to deliver anything of what he has promised when he goes into coalition with the Social Democrats or the Greens. At the very moment, it looks like there's only the chance of having a coalition with AfD, which he excludes, and then with the Social Democrats. And he will also not be able to deliver anything of what he promised. So that will be a very, very unstable coalition, and it will not last for 4 years. I think this is for sure. I would say that's for sure. And then we will have new election maybe within 2 years or something, because reality demands a change in policy. It's not AfD, it's the reality. We cannot make and go any further down the road, the one we were walking down the whole time.
Thank you so much. One more question. The economy in Germany is at the lowest point. People cannot pay their bills. The living costs are super high, and the AfD promised to go from renewable energies towards nuclear power, gas. Are there any other ways you could imagine to help the Germans with making the economy better and making the living costs, having less living costs? Is there anything you can tell us?
Well, the main problem for our industry is the level of energy prices. they are too high, and the energy supply is not sustainable. It's not stable, and this is impossible for our industry to survive under these preconditions. So this is what has to be changed firsthand, and it can be changed. It's only the question of political will, and this is what we would change. And if that's not changing, we're losing 10,000s of jobs every single month. At the moment, it's 10,000. It might double. Then we're losing 20,000 jobs per month, and then they will discover that even printing money is not solving the problem by far.
Thank you so much, Beatrix von Storch.
Thank you so much, Diana Resnick. Thank you so much there. And to your guest, Beatrix von Storch. Klaus, they were analysing there the state of the German economy, which is in its second year of recession. That's why investors and the markets are nervously looking as well to this outcome to make sure that Germany can get back on track. A reaction there to what you heard?
Yes, so first of all, it's not true that people who are voted for CDU want to have a coalition with the AfD. That was one of the things Beatrix von Storch. It's a wishful thinking from her. That's not true. Second, there are some doubts about this firewall. When I remember it correctly, J.D. Vance said, "In a democracy is no place for firewalls." I thought a lot about this sentence, and in a way, it's true because we were discussing this number thing and the coalition thing. If I go back one step, people will see tonight that 48, almost 50% of the Germans have voted for a center-right politics, and they will get maybe a social democrat, green-driven Chancellor Friedrich Merz from the Conservatives. On the long run, that's not healthy for a democracy, because then parties like the AfD will get much more attention. And I had some discussions here in Brussels. Some leaders from other countries fear that if this firewall thinking stays and stays and stays, AfD maybe will come up with 35 or 40% and can govern alone 4 years from now.
This is a huge theme here as well in Belgium, the cordon sanitaire. So maybe you can weigh in there.
And we have this experience in Belgium with a totally different approach in the Flemish part of Belgium in comparison with the southern part of Belgium. And we've seen that in the French-speaking part of Belgium, it's much more difficult for the far right to get more votes. But I don't say that this is a principle that could apply everywhere in Europe, because we can see in France, for instance, a similar situation with the Front National and Marine Le Pen very high when there are electoral campaigns, but they are not in power. And we've seen the last years how they were in a position to make more electoral progress. But one point, I don't know what will be the results in terms of seats, and I don't know what will be the choice that will be made by Friedrich Merz. But my impression is the following: if there would be doubts, if there would be the temptation with the CDU, CSU to make a coalition with the AfD, then it would mean, I think, a lack of confidence, a lack of trust in Brussels. Certainly in Brussels, there would be a serious disappointment, and there would be the fear that with such a coalition, it would put into question the necessity, the need to make the decision that we have discussed just before in the field of economic development, in the field of more efforts.
And in geopolitics too.
Because of the close ties between the AfD and Russia, and because of the way Elon Musk decided to interfere in this electoral campaign by supporting with a clear voice this political party.
Maybe I'm curious to hear your thoughts on Elon Musk weighing in here and supporting the AfD publicly, also given your title there with the Council of Europe, working on democracy issues.
Well, it shows the power of these oligarchs. First of all, have almost taken over power in some parts of the world, and in the U.S., there are many that are now calling it an oligarchy or a plutocracy. They have also taken over the public space. So the public space where we used to be the town hall or our pubs or our coffee places or taverns where you drink beer and you talk over politics. This is the public space. It is a digital space, and the rules of engagement are controlled by these people. The algorithms are the rules of engagement. So public debate. And is debate, a democratic debate, means that I respect you. We can actually talk. With these algorithms, we have seen that we are creating polarization, and I'm not just talking about fake news, but generally polarization, and not rather than looking for solutions, we're looking to win over each other or to there's hate speech and so on. So it's really undermining a sense of cohesion in our public debate, and I think that's one of the big problems. That has been used by the ultra-right, particularly because what they have been using in demagoguery, they've been taking an issue, which is an issue, it's a real issue, but finding solutions which are not solutions. But they are using this to emotions and so on. So, I mean, when I was Prime Minister, yes, I actually created a border. I put up a fence in northern Greece between Greece and Turkey for two reasons. One, we had mines and we had to take them out, and people were getting killed when they were crossing but I also wanted to regulate. But borders don't always work. A few years later, we had 1 million refugees and migrants cross into our islands, and we are seeing these pressures. So we really need to see this as a shared challenge rather than as a weapon for politics, and I think this is the problem. Okay. And just one more thing is, what this does and what Elon Musk does is creates this type of rhetoric and this type of work is dividing society, which makes it less capable to deal with the challenges ahead, because we do have to change. But when you are fearful, when you cannot take risks, when you cannot innovate, and I think in our societies we need to think of evolution, we need to change. But if you get a polarized situation, like in the US, it is incapacitating countries to be able to deal with the challenges of the time, which is climate change, which is inequalities, which is AI, which is possible pandemics, and so on.
Yeah, the challenges are indeed very clear. Well, earlier we heard from the headquarters of the AFD. Now it's time to check in with our correspondent who's standing by for us at the Socialists' headquarters at the SPD. Our Tamsin Paternoster is standing by for us. Tamsin, what has the reaction been there to the first exit polls that came out recently showing that the Socialists are coming in under 16% there?
Hi, Maeve. Yes, so there were some not very excited reactions here tonight. There were some gasps when that exit poll came out, particularly at the results of some of the smaller parties. As we know, the more smaller parties that are involved, that are in the Bundestag, the harder it will be for Merz to create a two-party coalition. But with the SPD in particular, there is not a lot of excitement here tonight, a lot of nervousness and not that much cheering amongst the party members at those results.
I think you put it perfectly there. A lot of gasps. I'll come back to you a little bit later. We just want to go straight over to the CDU headquarters, where the leader, the Spitzenkandidat Friedrich Merz, is speaking to his supporters. Take a listen.
Zuallererst Markus Söder herzlich danken, dem Parteivorsitzenden der CSU.
Thank you very much, Markus Söder, to our chair of the party. Thank you very much indeed.
Ich möchte dem
Well, I would like to express my gratitude to the Presidium and the Bundestag and to the thousands of members of the parties who did everything in their power in order to vote in favor of us. Well, I can tell to our voters, thank you very much indeed for the confidence which you have given proof of. For us, I know about the responsibility and the dimension of the challenges ahead of us. I am full of respect. I know it's not going to be easy. And I would also tell this to our political competitors. Our elections have been very tough and very hard, but they have been indispensable because of the difficult situation of our country, because of the economic situation, migration, security, defense. But now we are going to talk to each other, and we are going to be able to find a new solution to have a good parliamentarian majority, because the world outside is not waiting for us, and they're not waiting for long-term coalition discussions. We have to act as quickly as possible in order to be able to be present in Europe and in the world, and that Germany governs as soon as possible. And this is what we are in favor of. This is what I stand for, quite personally.
If you've just tuned in, you're watching Euronews here. This is our live election show, Germany Decides. We were just taking a listen there to Friedrich Merz. That's the Spitzenkandidat of the CDU party. I believe he was standing beside Markus Schröder. That's the head of the CSU. So the Bavarian party, the sister party. Your reaction to what he heard there? I mean, he heard there's a lot at stake, lots to do, but of course the challenge will be implementing it.
Okay, I'm pretty sure if he would see it as a big victory, he would have started with an amazing speech and not with the thank you to his colleagues. So it's not a defeated guy, but it's not a winner too. Because when I see it correctly, it ends up with plus 4%. So you can, you know it very well, you can say, yeah, we did it very well because we are better than the last time and we are the number one. That's very, very important things. But it's too less to be a strong next chancellor because he will need a lot of support from other parties in this coalition. And if it comes to a coalition with the red and green, with the Social Democrats and the Greens, it will be rather difficult to present and deliver this leadership we mentioned before. And he promised to the people. He promised a lot of things. He promised a change in politics. He promised a change in migration politics. He promised a change in economical questions. He promised a change in living together. He promised a change in how the relationship between the state and the citizens is. And in a coalition with left-wingers, like the Social Democrats and the Greens, it will be very difficult to deliver.
Well, politicians are very good at promising, aren't they?
And from my point of view, you could feel it if you saw him. I know him since 20 years. He's not the guy who feels now, wow, now I'm really, it was a breakthrough. He knows how much work is ahead of him.
But one woman who is celebrating tonight, that's Heidi Reichenich. She's the 36-year-old TikTok star and Instagram star who is with Die Linke, so the left party. She's managed to bring them back, if you like, from the dead. But for more insights on what exactly is going on tonight and what we've learned so far from the figures and, of course, from that exit polls, we'll be able to head over to Euronews newsroom. Tonight we have Stefan Kobe and Marit Gwynne-Jones, our analysts, who are standing by for us all night long, crunching those figures and telling us exactly what this all means for Germany and, of course, for the European Union. Before we bring them in, we can just take a look at the makeup of the Bundestag, how it stands right now. We can bring it up there on your screen so you can take a look. Because, of course, once we see the makeup of the Bundestag, it'll be up to the Bundestag then to endorse and vote on the future Chancellor. 316 seats are needed for a majority. It's clear that no party has managed to get that. And as we heard from Klaus Strunz there, Friedrich Merz did not do as well as he hoped. He gave a rather sombre speech. Charles Michel, tomorrow morning, of course, the EU institutions will be waking up, presenting their stance to the news. They would have preferred perhaps to see one party do much better and have a clear outcome, so we don't see now weeks and months of political wrangling, trying to get a coalition when the time is passing so fast.
I have the impression that the hope in Brussels will be that very quickly there could be a coalition and there will be a coalition in Germany. It is the best case scenario for the EU institutions, point one. But I listened carefully to what was said by Friedrich Merz, and in fact he passed two messages. The first one is the campaign is over. It was very controversial. Now we have to talk. And point two, he said we have to make the decisions as soon as possible. This was the message he passed tonight. This is good, but indeed it means that with less than 30%, he will have to negotiate. We've understood that he doesn't intend to negotiate with AfD. It means that the other parties, even if they lost the elections, they could be tomorrow in a position of a kind of political victory, and there's a difference between an electoral
I'm just going to stop you there,
and a political victory. It's not the same thing.
Olaf Scholz, the Spitzenkandidat and the current Chancellor, of course, of Germany, is speaking now to his members. Take a listen.
Well, I think the result which we have achieved is a result which we can learn of together, and we can go ahead. I would like to express my gratitude for the fact that during the last few months, people have fought tremendously. The polls haven't gotten any better. Nevertheless, the Social Democrats have presented arguments. They have talked to citizens. They have knocked at citizens' door, and they have also organized huge events in favor of the Social Democrats. And in this connection, I'd like to express my gratitude to all citizens in favor of us. Thank you very much indeed.
That was Olaf Scholz there, the current Chancellor of Germany, the Spitzenkandidat, the lead candidate of the Socialist Party, making a very brief speech there to his supporters. For more on what's going on tonight and how we should interpret the first exit polls, we can head over now to Euronews newsroom, where our analysts Stefan Krobe and Mairead Gwynne-Jones are standing by for us.
Yes, Maeve, indeed. Well, the election is over and now the political horse trading begins. And let me tell you this, Germany is not known for forming quick coalitions. In the past, the time was between 23 and 86 days. This is what the German parties need to form a coalition. We don't know what will happen because there are several options possible. What we know for sure is that the new Bundestag must be constituted by March the 25th at the very latest. And then throughout this time, the parties will look at each other, and we heard Friedrich Merz having some warm words for his political opponents, praising kind of the Greens and the Social Democrats. Obviously, these are his potential partners, his most likely potential partners. This is totally different from what he said just a few days ago when he said the Greens are just idiots. But we'll see. They know each other quite well, and we see what comes out of it. So there are several, based on the results that we have so far tonight, there are several options possible. There is a black coalition together with the Social Democrats, the so-called Grand Coalition. There is a coalition possible between the Christian Democrats, the Social Democrats, and the Greens. There might even be possible a so-called Germany coalition based on their colors, Christian Democrats, Social Democrats, and the Liberals. This, of course, depends on whether they will make it to the parliament. So, Marit, walk us through the next, the immediate future here. What are the options?
Yes, because this is very crucial, as we've heard already. Now, to caveat, this is based on the exit poll. We're assuming here that the FDP, the Liberal Party, and also Sarah Wagenknecht has made it. That could change tonight, Stefan. We need to underline that. So this could shift slightly, but the way we're looking at it right now, that grand coalition is not viable because between them, the CDU-CSU and the SPD, so the centre-right and the centre-left, haven't got enough combined seats in order to form a majority coalition. So what are the options? Well, this is what Friedrich Merz, the leader of CDU, did not want tonight. If this stands, he will have to rely on a third partner to be able to form a coalition government. Now, as we mentioned earlier, there are several possibilities, including this one known as the Kenya coalition, based, of course, on the colours that you see on the screen. This is really not what Friedrich Merz was hoping for tonight, having to rely on the Greens, a party which ideologically is quite far apart from his. Now, also, as we're looking at it right now, it's technically also possible, but with a big caveat, because the FDP might not make it into the Bundestag, the so-called Deutschland coalition or the Germany coalition, again based on the colours. This again is very, very complex because obviously these two parties, the SPD and the FDP, have had a falling out. This is why the current coalition government fell apart back in November because of a rift between these two parties. So it's looking very, very complicated for the CDU-CSU at the moment, and it looks like it's going to have to shop among those parties that it probably didn't want to go towards. But at the moment, it has no choice because only a three-way coalition looks possible based on the numbers that we have right now, Stefan.
And actually, this would mean a continuation of the sort of political instability that we've we've had last year, the final months of the famous traffic light coalition, when they never loved each other to begin with, but it was impossible for them to finish this term. Now we're in a similar situation. I wouldn't bet any money on if I may bring this back here for a second, on a coalition that like this one, that will last 4 years. But of course, for Friedrich Merz, and that is his big problem, bring in the Greens again here, SPD and Greens together are as strong as the Christian Democrats. So we have basically two blocks here. Instead of a grand coalition, we have a very grand coalition. And whether this will make it through 2029, I think, is a big question.
We'll keep an eye on this throughout the night. Let's see how it shifts, so do come back to us. But for now, back to you, Maeve.
We will indeed. Mary Gwynne Jones and Stefan Kobe, thank you very much for those very eloquent updates on the challenges now facing Friedrich Merz to try and cobble together a coalition. Stefan Kobe mentioned there that we could be entering into weeks or months of political instability, in Germany. But earlier, Friedrich Merz, when standing beside Markus Söder, the head of the SCU, speaking to his supporters, he was very clear that they would need to, without any delay, make sure that they come together with a coalition very fast. He said the world is not waiting for us, neither for lengthy talks or discussions or negotiations. I mean, we've been discussing here in the studio about what's at stake right now for the European Union, what's at stake for the world. Tomorrow morning, the French President Emmanuel Macron will be heading over to Washington, D.C. with the UK Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, who now is playing a major role around the EU table, it seems, while we all wait for Germany to get its act together really and play a role again in the European Union. Jean-Michel.
This is a very important element in my opinion, because more than ever we need a united European Union, and we can see that in the days to come or in the weeks to come some very important decisions could be made by others with a huge impact in Europe, and that's why we need as soon as possible a German government operational with the legitimacy and also in a position to work with the European partners, not only within the EU but also with partners on the European continent like the United Kingdom, like Norway for instance. And this is crucial because we have seen the last days how the United States have started to engage with Russia without taking us into account at all. And we have seen how Emmanuel Macron, together with some other European leaders, is trying to bring Europe around the table. This is absolutely clear that with Germany, with a strong government in Germany, it is easier to make sure that our voice is heard outside of Europe.
This question of who should sit around that table as well, if it ever comes to the European Union getting a seat at the table on the future of Ukraine. As we heard there from Jean-Michel, discussions are ongoing now between the Americans and the Russians without the Ukrainians, even though it's about the future of Ukraine, and without the Europeans are just not actors here.
That's the big issue, and I think this shows, first of all, the policy that the U.S. has towards Europe. It is a sense that Europe is not really something they like, or at least the administration. They're not happy with Europe, and they feel that they can deal with things at the power level. This is rule of the powerful, but this is where Europe really needs to stand up, and Ukraine cannot do it alone. Ukraine needs to be at the table, but without Europe standing up for Ukraine to be at the table, and Europe at the table also, and that's why we need a unified stance, and that means, of course, a strong position and German government, which will be helpful. Others too, but obviously Germany will play an important role. So I think this is the major initial challenge in the next few weeks. It's not in next year; it's the next few weeks, which we have to deal with.
Because this message that Europe should be united, the European Union should be united, but at the moment we see each Prime Minister do what it likes, really. And we've seen as well this weekend at the Conservative conference over in the United States, we saw Giorgia Meloni. She zoomed into the meeting Liv Strust as well.
Yeah, but it's very clear, and it's not a surprise. We've seen the last month how Donald Trump's party, together with Elon Musk and some others, are trying to spread more divisions across the EU. This is an absolutely clear strategy. We see what they are trying to do, and that's why we have to react. And here I think that the European Council, a body I know very well, will have a very important role to play in the weeks to come, in the months to come, to unite the European Union, to make clear choices, and to demonstrate that some initiatives taken in the United States are not only better for Europe, it's also better for our member states, including Italy, for instance.
Yes, and I think that just to add to that, Europe is a rule-based, principle-based project. That's how we are together. We are different languages, different ethnicities. We've had our wars in the past. We've created this peace project based on the rules. Unluckily, with the new administration in the U.S., a rule-based world is not what they want. It is a power-based world. So this is the clash. But this is also important for Ukraine, because whatever solution comes out, it should be a rule-based one. It should be based on international law and some basic principles. If it's not, we are giving license to other leaders and autocrats around the world to do the same.
I like this analysis very much with the wordings of power-based and rule-based, because I think it's very necessary that the rule-based system shows power too.
Absolutely.
And that's our weakness right now. Because from the perspective of the United States, we are weak. I think that Donald Trump is thinking about Ursula von der Leyen not the best things. Maybe he is not very convinced that she's a strong leader. And he makes exactly what you mentioned. He tries to build up bilateral relationships with European countries. And that's so toxic that really this German coalition building should be very fast. But I'm not so optimistic like you, because in this constellation, with these numbers on the table, every single of these questions you raised will be a big debate in this coalition in the beginning.
And to get a glimpse of the debate that's taking place right now in Berlin at the headquarters of the CDU, we can bring in Liv Straudt, our correspondent who is there. What are members there and supporters of Friedrich Merz and the party saying to you tonight?
Hello, good evening. Thank you very much, Maeve. So, as you can see, it's starting to clear out around here. But of course, the atmosphere has been very electric. As soon as it was announced that Friedrich Merz would be the next Chancellor of Germany, the room erupted into a crowd of cheers. And of course, when Scholz was beamed into the room for his speech, boos erupted as well. So it has been a very fun and joyful evening so far here.
But Friedrich Merz didn't really get, if you look at the exit polls, the figures that he was hoping for, Liv Straudt. What are his options now when it comes to forming a coalition government? What are people there telling you?
Well, that's very interesting because, of course, everything was riding on the three small parties, the Liberal FDP, Die Linke and the far-left Sarah Wagenknecht alliance. Now, it looks like all three parties have made their 5% threshold, which means that it's very likely it could be a three-party coalition. So now I guess it will be SPD and CDU handling with the FDP and also the Greens. So it will be a very exciting next couple of months to see who the next coalition partners will be. Now, over the past couple of months, I've been speaking to many members of parliament from the CDU, the FDP and all the other smaller parties who have told me that they're going to want to build a coalition as soon as possible. They've noticed that Germany has a weakened economy and that it is struggling at the moment, and they want to have a strong leadership in Europe. And of course, Germany is Europe's biggest economy.
Good evening. You're here live on Euronews watching Germany Decides, our special show all about the federal snap Bundestag elections that took place today in Germany. If you've just joined us, we can already inform you that the first exit polls are out, showing that the CDU, so the Conservatives, led up by Friedrich Merz, are on top with their sister partner CSU, followed by the AfD party, that's the Alternative for Deutschland, coming in there at 19.5%, followed then by the Socialists at 16%, and coming in then underneath then the Greens at 13.5%. Earlier we were just listening to Liv Straudt, our correspondent, who is amidst all the supporters of the CDU saying that there was ruptures of joy and excitement when the room heard that Friedrich Merz would be the next Chancellor of Germany. She expressed excitement and thrill in her voice that, these coalition talks could take a couple of months to get going. Obviously, she'll be kept very busy, but meanwhile, the rest of the European Union and the rest of the world will be waiting to see stability and predictability coming from Berlin. George?
Well, that's the main challenge right now, and it's a global challenge, it's a European challenge, it's a German challenge. We are at a very crucial historical point in the world, and this is why I think these elections are so important, whatever the coalition is, and that's why it's so important that they are able to create a government. Democracy takes time, and we need to respect that. But then there are pressing issues too, and those issues should be on the top of the minds of all those who will be negotiating.
And what about the socialists? What's happening to the socialists? They did very badly as well in the European Parliament elections. Their voters have drifted off to the further left or perhaps to the far right. You've lost hold.
I think there's a wider trend of how the working class has changed over the years, which was our basic base, how the digital world has splintered our societies. We had our base, which was a real strong community, and how also inequality has hollowed out the middle class and created a sense of fear in the working class, and that's how it's easy to be demagogically say, okay, these foreigners are the problem, which there are issues, but it's easy to target them and then create this sort of demagoguery which doesn't allow. But I just want to add to this. I think we need to also rethink in this digital age, but also this age of major changes, a very different type of party, where our citizens are much more involved. I've been working a lot on the citizens' assemblies, something like an e-agora, where citizens can actually be active every day. I mean, if we go back to ancient democracy, of course, we didn't have women, and there were slaves and so on, but active citizenry was absolutely necessary. And not only that, it was an educated citizenry where theater, music, math, philosophy, games were all part of being a good citizen. At the same time, it was a way to find ways for people to be active. So a citizen would be at least twice in their life part of the deciding bodies. We don't have that. We still are looking for who is going to be our savior, who is going to be our next, the next chancellor, who's going to be the next prime minister, as if the solutions are there. We as politicians have to say at some point, these are difficult times. We don't have all the solutions. We want to be innovative with our citizens, and there is a lot of wisdom if we use experts, but also our citizens' knowledge to create consensus. Unluckily, when we have demagoguery and when we have this polarization and we have inequalities, this does not allow us the capacity to have this type of citizen participative democracy. But we need to move into this, and that's what I want to see in the Socialist Party. I would like to see a Spitzenkandidat in the next European elections from the Socialist Party elected by all the members of the Socialists of all of Europe. Now, that would be a very radical difference. I've written about it, but I think that would really mobilize and give the citizen a sense that, yeah, I am part of this. Now, I might be even voting for a German, for a Spitzenkandidat, because of positions, or maybe they will vote for a Greek, who knows?
I know there's been a lot of efforts and discussions around that on the Conference on the Future of Europe as well, but that is a very important point you make, that citizens want to be heard, people want to be heard, and this is where parties like Die Linke, fronted by the 36-year-old TikTok sensation Heidi Reichnick, are doing really well. They're listening to people, they're down where people are, and also the AfD. They're meeting and greeting and speaking to their voters and connecting with them to make them feel heard. Klaus.
So I was hearing you very interesting, because it's the first time I hear an answer to this TikTok phenomenon. Maybe this social media thing was the beginning of a reorganizing of the democratic process, like you said.
Yes.
If social media is so strong because it gives to everybody a voice. It's misused and something like
a sense of a voice,
and
anyway.
Exactly, and the political system tends to exclude people after they have voted, because then others representatives are taking care of it. So I think that's maybe one of the biggest ideas we can.
And I will give you. I have written a report on the Council of Europe for a fourth branch of government, a deliberative branch, where we could have AI help everybody be on a platform. It could be a parliamentary platform. It could be. Let us assume that the European Parliament had made this. It sounds a bit crazy idea that Twitter should have been bought by the European Parliament and not by Musk, and then use that as a platform for citizens' decisions. And you can use AI, a good algorithm.
You can
for
use
real
virtual
debate.
reality to invite us all to.
And I was in the Paris summit recently, and yes, there were organizations like Make.org or Mission Publique and others, the Odyssey, the Democracy Odyssey, who were saying we can use AI for citizen participation, for real empowerment, not just fighting with each other on some Facebook or something. So I think we have to be innovative. And
we have to be innovative.
Politics. The ancient idea of politics is using an imagination for a different world. It's not about polls. It's not about campaign financing. It's not about trying to,
it's about being very creative and thinking outside the box.
Open outside the box, absolutely.
I'm going to stop you there and bring in Yanis Varoufakis, a well-known politician as well in Europe, the former finance minister of Greece back in the days of the Greek debt crisis, and now the Secretary General of Democracy in Europe movement. Yanis Varoufakis, lovely to see you. Thank you so much for joining us here on our live show all about the German federal elections, the Bundestag elections. What has been your reaction so far to the exit polls? Have you been following them carefully?
Oh, yes. They seem to be totally aligned with the opinion polls previously. Let's see whether they will also be aligned with the actual results. I suspect they will be. But if you want my reaction to the outcome, as opposed to the accuracy of the polls, allow me to say that from where I'm standing, this is a very paradoxical election. Because at once, it is more or less business as usual, in the sense that we're going to have a change of chancellor, but more or less the same quasi-permanent coalition of Christian Democrats, Social Democrats, with the splattering of the Greens. The same coalition that, in my estimation, in my judgment, put Germany on a long road towards stagnation for the last 15, 20 years. And at the very same time, this is why I'm calling it a paradoxical election, it's an utterly transformational election in the sense that the AfD, the ultra-right-wing, xenophobic Alternative for Deutschland, is becoming normalized, not only because it has doubled, or more or less doubled, its percentage, but because its policies seem to have infiltrated the firewall. They have gone into the CDU, the CSU, the SPD, the FDP, and also parts of what used to be the left. So this is my take on it. It's a highly paradoxical election. It's business as usual when Germany cannot afford business as usual, and also the normalization of something that should never have been normalized.
You mentioned the AfD. Why do you think they did so well in those elections today? Is it because people don't trust the left anymore?
Well, there's no such thing as the left in Germany. The Social Democrats have been instrumental since 2009 in imposing particularly harsh austerity, not just on the people of Greece or Ireland or Portugal, but on the people of Germany. Remember, Mr. Steinbrück was the architect of the catastrophic, utterly mad debt break, the constitutional provision by which essentially the constitution prevents investment from taking place in a country like Germany. So this stagnation has been the outcome of this permanent coalition of the center-right and the center-left, with the Greens as well. So who was left to harvest the bitter harvest of discontent? The ultra-right.
And what about Die Linke? They're doing relatively well. Do you think they should join the coalition government or rather join the opposition?
It depends on what their true motivation is. As a left-winger, I wish them well, but they haven't shown any signs in the last few years, the last 5-6 years, of being relevant and radical at the same time. If they simply want to be another variant of the Greens or the Social Democrats, they can join this coalition. If they want to play a constructive role as a radical opposition, they have to acquire some radical positions. And they have not done that, except for, and that is not to be scoffed at, I recognize the value of that, of stemming the ideological march of the alt-right, the xenophobic AfD. So I very much fear that the next 4 years, in exactly the same way, remember when Emmanuel Macron was elected or re-elected in France, he was considered by the liberal center to be their salvation from the galloping Le Pen, the ultra-right. In the end, he ended up massively reinforcing the ultra-right and also adopting many of their policies. And I very much fear that the next Merz perma-coalition of the radical center, of the center-right and the center-left, is going to be essentially, unwittingly, I'm not saying that there's any intention there, they are going to be strengthening the AfD.
And just finally, we're here with Charles Michel, the former president of the European Council, who was stressing the necessity for unity among the 27 EU leaders at this very turbulent time for Europe and the world. From where you are speaking to us tonight, how do things look here in Brussels? Do we look like we've got it together here, or is the European Union, quite frankly, going through a very, very challenging time?
With all due respect, our European leaders, including your guest, resemble headless chickens running around in panic, in total and utter disarray. That was the inevitable outcome of 15, 20 years of paying lip service to solidarity when all they were doing was imposing harsh austerity on the peoples of Europe while printing massive quantities of money for big business and big finance, which never invested it, because when the many are in pecunious, why would big business invest? They took the money of the European Central Bank and simply bought back their own shares and bought fancy apartments in Berlin and Hamburg. And therefore, now we have the chickens are coming home to roost, they're headless, and they are easy prey for somebody like Donald Trump.
Yanis Varoufakis, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your perspectives on the German Bundestag elections with us, and also on the future of European Union, and also on our guests here that will have to, of course, react to that comment from where he's sitting tonight. He's looking at the European Union and the constant summits and the constant squabbling as headless chickens.
Yeah, I've listened very carefully to what he just said, but in fact he's repeating always the same thing. I remember a few years ago when we were around the table of the European Council, it was exactly the same speech and the same ideology. And one thing is absolutely certain, there are mistakes made in Europe for sure, but it's also clear that this particular project is a project that is giving more prosperity, more social cohesion to our people, but it doesn't mean that everything is perfect, not at all. And it means that today, and we made this point several times tonight, today, again, we need to make clear choices. We need to make clear decisions on the future. And again, I'm absolutely convinced on my side that economic development, industrial base, indeed, less regulation, a better regulation, this is the choice we have to make. And certain element, if we want not only to be a playground for others, but if we want to be master of our European destiny in the future, we need to invest much more in defense, in security, and we need to make it together. Look, COVID-19 was an interesting example. At the beginning of the crisis, it was very difficult to be on the same page. After a few weeks, we understood that we would be much stronger and much more efficient if we would act together. This is what we did. It was successful. Ukraine, it was not taken for granted that we would be able to make united decisions when it comes to sanctions against Russia, when it comes to more financial support for Ukraine, granting the candidate status to Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia. But we made those decisions and we managed to be united. And indeed, I think that probably Donald Trump is a chance for the European Union. It's a chance because it makes very clear that now we need to decide by ourselves and to make the best choices for the future and for our citizens.
And you do feel a sense of urgency in this town. Summits are being called more frequently. There is a sense of, we need to be together just this weekend as well. The whole Commission College, in fact, 24 commissioners are heading over to Kiev to mark the third-year anniversary of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia. So the momentum is slightly there, but of course you can't tell certain member states either what to do, Klaus.
Yeah, and I think there is one sentence, it's a sentence of the last years, and I fear in a way it's a sentence of the future as well, of politicians, and it's the sentence, I would like, but I cannot. If you ask me, we should do it like this. If you ask my party, we should do it like this. But we cannot because, I'm in a coalition with Greens and Reds. I'm now in a difficult situation, and Trump and Putin. There are so many reasons I hear every day why we cannot act. And the craziest thing is, it's true in a way. But I have a longing for people who overcome this together, not one of them alone. Together. And I'm interested in maybe political means to do this. And you are so experienced, maybe you can help.
Well, obviously, we're bound by our the EU treaties.
This is a very important point, because I feel it indeed. If many populist parties are growing across the EU, this is because there is a lack of trust. There is a lack of trust because there is this impression that politicians are talking, but they are not in a position to do things and to get concrete results for them. And that's why the social networks, what was said with the artificial intelligence, is certainly something we need to investigate. How we can use those social networks in a smarter way to protect and to defend the democratic principles and values. Point one. And point two, there is a very difficult challenge in Europe. This is what I call the strategic communication. This is extremely difficult from Brussels to argue, to explain the people that what we are doing is useful. It has a direct impact in their daily life. And if I take the example of Ukraine, this is so easy, for instance, for those who do not like the choice we have made to support Ukraine, to spread the idea that we spend a lot of money for Ukraine, that at the same time we are not able to protect our own citizens, etc., etc. And that's why democracy, it requires a lot of efforts, political efforts, it requires a lot of tenacity. And indeed, there is this difficult challenge because it's much easier to give the impression that everything is simple, that simple answers could work, even if this is not the truth.
And this is a topic that Yanis Varoufakis is very passionate about too, and he's still with us here, in fact, and wanted to weigh in on the debate. Yanis Varoufakis, the floor is yours.
Europeans have had enough of the smoke and mirrors that comes from Brussels. We heard a very good example of that. Just many words full of promise and full of, good feelings. But Mr. Michel, since 2009, 2010, when the Eurozone experienced its first existential crisis, we failed to do the one thing that we had to do, which is to create a large-scale investment fund to the tune of 5% of GDP in order to create the second pillar that the Eurozone never had, the investment pillar. The result is Europe, and Germany in particular, have not invested for 15 years now. We missed the whole technological revolution. Your nice, beautiful words cannot make up for the fact that we have missed one technological revolution, and the result has been a flight of capital, which is now, I'm very much fear, unstoppable. Unless, even Mario Draghi, with whom we had so many clashes, 6-7 years after I had proposed this 5% of European GDP investment fund, has now come out and said that. And what has happened? Zero. And nothing is going to happen, because you can see the politics that you have created by 5-6 years of paralysis. The politics is moving in the opposite direction to that we would all want to see, of the consolidation. We're moving away from a fiscal union, not towards a fiscal union. The merged government, the next government in France, the government in Austria, the government in the Netherlands, have neither the will nor the analytical power to do that which is necessary to stop the stagnation of Europe. We used to say, and this is how I end, we used to say, remember, that the United States innovates, China mimics, and Europe regulates. Well, now we have a situation where China innovates, Trump mimics, and Europe stagnates. And that is down to you and the fact that for the last 5-6 years you've been saying the same words, and the only thing that has come out of Brussels has been smoke and mirrors.
Yanis Varoufakis, thank you so much for that.
A short reaction. I've repeated many times that indeed we need to invest. We need to make clear choices. This was the first answer I gave to your questions at the beginning of this debate. Point one. But one thing is certain: we need also to be consistent. It means that we can invest. We can decide to invest massively if at the same time we are ready to put in place some reforms. And the current government in Greece is putting in place the reforms that are needed. Yeah, I know this is your traditional position. It's too late. Everything is dark, and you are all stupid except myself. But I have a different opinion with small nuances.
Industry, they are moving out of Europe because of what you have not been doing all these years.
Klaus?
No.
I might want to say something.
Yes, absolutely. I'm curious to hear George Papandreou if you share the views there.
I have my differences with Yanis Varoufakis, but I would say two things which I would agree. Of course, I do believe that with the financial crisis, and I'm not talking about Greece now, the global financial crisis, we bailed out the banks. The banks have become much more difficult for citizens right now. What I saw is we have a massive concentration of wealth and power in a number of areas and corporations which are much stronger than our governments. So whether it's finance, whether it's digital, whether it's pharma, big pharmacy, pharmaceuticals, whether it's agribusiness, whether it's military, they have such huge lobbying power. I take the U.S., but it's also in Europe, which I feel that is one of the big problems which has stagnated, not helped us move forward as societies, and it has created huge inequalities. If you look at Oxfam, who come out with all these very important things. First of all, they are stopping the climate change. Well, I didn't mention petroleum and energy too. They have these lobbies are stopping doing everything they can not to move forward really towards a greening of our economies. And of course, when you have Trump basically saying, following this thing like saying drill, 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 baby drill, that's what they've been lobbying for. I would also say that so we in Europe we do need. I would not say in a polemical way. I talked about Eurobonds, so this is the idea that we can pool. We can pool our resources, and I think it's much less controversial in the end because it's something which can spread. It can be regulated. It can be, as you said, the EIB can have a very important role to make sure that these are investments, in general, that are positive and viable and not waste of money. And also the European Commission can play an important role in making sure that these are Europe-wide types of investments, which will help us all. We're talking about a single market which is not competitive. Draghi, in his recent article, said of all the hindrances and problems and so on. And this is what and I think we need to have confidence in what we can do. And during the crisis, it is true that there was a lot of demagoguery on all sides about the economic crisis in Greece. Yep. I took over to change. I was doing reforms, and I was getting very demagogic from a lot of the media that the Greeks are lazy. I looked at the OECD numbers, and Greeks work more hours than any other European. Secondly, of course, from Greece, there was a lot of demagoguery from parties too, saying, "Yeah, let's kick out Merkel, kick out the Troika, and so on." What that did is it did not allow us to actually look at the problems in a greater depth. So I think this is what we need. We don't need polemical statements like this. What we need is, as Klaus was saying earlier, we need to think of new forms, more innovative forms
and
of bringing our citizens
coming together.
I'm
going to stop you there. I'm also going to thank Yanis Varoufakis for being our guest with us tonight here live on Euronews, for bringing in his insights and his perspectives. If you've just joined us, we're here digesting the outcome of the the federal Bundestag elections that were taking place today in Germany, but also giving the European angle and deep diving into the recent EU history, which of course just 14, 15 years ago, we all remember well the Greek debt crisis, when George Papandreou, one of our guests tonight, when he was the Prime Minister then.
And you had just come to Brussels.
And I had just arrived in Brussels, yeah, for any of our regular viewers might remember. We also had Yanis Varoufakis, who was the Finance Minister back then and spent many of the moments with Michel, who of course is the former European Council President and the former Belgian Prime Minister. But we are here, of course, to talk about Germany, and that is where Mara Gwynne-Jones and Stefan Krobe, our expert analysts, will enlighten us now with the winners and the losers of tonight's exit polls.
Yes, Maeve. So we've been digging into the numbers again and looking at the vote gain and the vote loss for each of the parties. Now, a clear picture here in terms of the loss. It's the traffic lights that we're seeing, what we expected. Time in government hasn't been easy for the SPD, the Greens and the FDP, but probably what we're seeing here is the Greens emerging slightly less scathed than the other two parties, but still a tough night for those parties that are just coming out of the government. Now, AFD, as you can see here, a 9.7% increase in the vote compared to 2021, of course, which was the past election. That could see it double its seats in the Bundestag, and it means that it's a historical performance for them in a federal election. And interestingly, their performance is stronger than what it was as well in the European election last year, which is usually a vote where people feel more rebellious and are more likely to give a protest vote. But now the AfD have emerged as the second party in the federal election for the first time. Now the gains... Here, CDU, the CSU, Friedrich Merz will be disappointed. They had hoped for pushing up their vote share a little bit more, and for Die Linke, the left, they'll be very happy because it didn't look like that a few weeks ago. It looked like they wouldn't increase their vote share so much. We should caveat this, the Sarah Wagenknecht Alliance, they're a first-time entry in the Bundestag. Stefan, any insights on this?
Well, a couple of observations, because this chart is a little more clarifying. Well, first of all, and you said it, the former traffic light coalition has lost. See, Social Democrats minus 9.4, the Greens minus 2.3, and the Free Democrats 6.4. They might not be in the Bundestag. I'm a little bit obsessed with the SPD tonight. Look at this, minus 9.4. This is a historical shellacking of the Social Democrats. Never have they reached a bottom of 16%. And then if you ask, well, why? I mean, the Greens, obviously they have a much more loyal electorate, and of course the FDP is playing in a kind of minor league. But I'm referring to some of the stuff that Mr. Varoufakis just said, the Social Democrats not representing their core electorate. And what is the result? Well, look at this. Plus 9-something%, minus 9-something%. So it looks, at least visually, that the SPD has lost all their voters to the AfD, not to the Christian Democrats, because, as you rightly pointed out, their gains are relatively small. They would have wished them much, much more. So that is, for me, one of the takeaways of the evening. Of course, we don't know how, all these movements from one party to another in detail, but the numbers here are just striking to me.
Well, we might have take a look at voter migration later tonight if we have that data through. But perhaps, Stefan, it could also be a personality issue. Olaf Scholz has been deeply unpopular with some cohorts of the German population. And if we do look at some of the opinion polling that's been happening before this vote, if we can bring this up, let's see. Pollsters asked Germans, who would you rather have as chancellor? This was before the vote, and we know that voters are not directly electing their chancellor, but it does give us a feel of how people have been viewing the lead candidates. It does shape this election campaign. Robert Habeck of the Greens, the current vice chancellor, more popular than Scholz. Could Scholz's deep unpopularity also have dampened that SPD vote, do you think?
I think so. I mean, there was a speculation that with another candidate, the SPD might have scored differently, but then the basic question is, if you're an SPD voter and you were disappointed by your government, does that depend really on the candidate? Interesting question. What strikes me first is that all the candidates are basically in line, at least the major candidates, with their national result. Look at this. Friedrich Merz, 32% would love him as chancellor. The result of the Christian Democrats was 29 plus something percent, point something percent. Robert Habeck here, much more popular in the general public than his party, because his party scored 12 point something percent, 21%. Even Olaf Scholz 18% compared to 16% of his party popularity, his party's result. And then look at this. Alice Weidel, the AfD, the far-right candidate, only 14% of Germans want her to become chancellor, but we know that 20% of Germans voted for her party. So she is less popular than her party,
despite
contrary
all the noise
to all the other candidates.
and all the big campaigning that we've seen her with Vance, with Elon Musk, and so on. So perhaps not as popular as among AfD voters as we would imagine.
Is it because she's a woman in a very, male-dominated party, in a male-dominated electorate? We don't know.
Something the data doesn't tell us. We'll be back very soon with more insights. Maeve, back to you.
You will indeed. Thank you so much, Mara Gwynne-Jones there and Stefan Kobe with all the latest on these high-stakes elections, Bundestag federal elections, snap elections that were called just before Christmas when the traffic light coalition collapsed in quite a messy night. In fact, the night it collapsed, remember, it was the same night that Donald Trump was voted in over in the United States. So it was a historic night, in fact, Klaus, that you were keeping a very close eye on. Let's talk about the campaign. Are you relieved it's over?
Yeah, I don't think so. Honestly, I fear that the campaign will start again tomorrow in the morning when they are dealing about the preconditions of the coalitions. The same old borders are there, the same old gaps will be there. I took some notes when it comes to European topics like defense. Imagine a discussion between a conservative and a green and a social democrat about defense of Europe. It tends to be an endless discussion. If it comes to money, who should pay for whom? It's not possible to make a deal about this in 2 days. Yeah. So I'm really pessimistic if it stays like we see it now, that it will a very fast thing. So it becomes summer.
And Christian Lindner, that's the head of the FDP, he's been speaking to his voters earlier with tears in his eyes, Charles Michel, saying that they're paying a heavy price for these elections. His future really is very uncertain.
Yeah, I don't want to make any comment on his future. This is his responsibility
but
to
he's
clarify.
Your friend.
To clarify. Yes, I appreciate him, even if on some topics we are not exactly on the same page, but we are in the same political party. But indeed, the months to come will be important, and I don't underestimate all the difficulties to make a coalition agreement in Germany, because those topics are internally very controversial. But sometimes some external factors, and the geopolitical reality is an external factor. It can have an effect, it can have an impact on the way political parties are negotiating. I have this experience in Belgium. You know that in Belgium, usually we take time before we are in position to make a government. But Belgium is not Germany. And at the geopolitical level, the weeks to come will be crucial, will be decisive, because some important decisions will be made in relationship with the security on the European continent. Important decisions will be made in relationship with the economic development
but
and innovation.
Even when Belgium doesn't have a government, the country tends to function in the sense that the bins are collected, taxes are collected, because the regional structure and the political structure of this country, whereas in Germany it does feel like it's just come to a grind in the last couple of months, and in fact years, since the Traffic Coalition government came into place and were unable to deal with the challenges that they put forward for themselves back in 2022 even. And now it's 2025, and all those challenges, even from a couple of years back, George Papandreou, are still on their plates.
Well, I think what is important is that institutions, if they are working, if they have had a tradition, if they may be part of an established way of politics, if there's good governance, then yes, sometimes you can wait for the final governance structures. And that's why Belgium and other countries, Holland also has this quite, and a number of countries which are basically have these simple proportional voting systems are able to function without, and particularly if you have a decentralized local government with quite a bit of power to be able to work on daily issues. However, we are in a globalized world. We are in a world which is no longer simply local, and that's one of our problems. Klaus was mentioning before, sometimes problems for politicians. We are local politicians. We are chosen by our local or national voters. However, the problems are global. And this is a contradiction which makes democracy more difficult, but absolutely necessary, because we need to bring in our citizens to be able to understand the challenges that the leadership has today. And this is what the coalition or the parties in Germany will have to do. They will have to get out of their campaign mode, if you like, as you said.
Even though Klaus thinks the campaign will continue tomorrow morning.
And say, okay, there are other issues which actually need us to put our heads together and talk to our citizens and say, listen, we have to find what we do on these issues. And it's not easy. It's not easy because if there are huge divides, then it's impossible. But if there are some areas where they can work together, and foreign policy and where Europe is going, and this is, I think, something which may happen.
But it's not really
Germans,
foreign policy, defence that were on people's minds as they went to vote. It was more the economy, housing crisis, migration.
This could actually, one could actually think of this, because defence in many of the countries, take the US, take Israel, take other countries, was the basis for innovation in technology and for growth. So let us think of security, and even in a wider sense, defense and innovation, for startups, for venture capital, for investment. And I would add then, of course, for security, climate change is part of security. We could be investing in something which gives us a competitive advantage globally. We have the minds, we have the people. So it's not necessarily that these issues are separate and different from what actually the German people are asking for. What they
Even though you mentioned climate change, we remember a couple of years ago the Green Wave momentum, the Friday for Future marchers out on the streets. Now in the campaign, it was only Robert Habeck, the Spitzencandidate of the Greens, who was preaching for net neutrality and stressing the importance of reaching our goals here when it comes to the climate. For other politicians, they didn't go there, fearing that they could lose voters.
Yeah, I think because of the priorities. Because if you now make a top prior topic out of climate issues and something like that, you will not get the attention of a mass audience in Germany.
Even though what we're seeing in Europe, in the European Union, in EU member states now, the drastic floods, the storms, the rain, climate change is happening.
In some sense, I think people now have, particularly in Europe, have felt that this is a natural thing that will happen. But there's another caveat, I think, which is important. Some of the policies we have tried, and Macron, of course, faced this, with good intention. He put taxes on petrol and diesel, but then he had the gilets jaunes, the yellow jackets, because the poor or the wage earners were affected much more by these taxes. So we don't only need a climate change transition to green, it does have to be a just transition, and I would say also a participative one, because it's a major changes in our lives.
And on that word, participate, we can actually bring in the face of the Friday for Future marches from Germany, Luisa Neubauer. She's a well-known climate activist, and she joins us now live on the show Germany Decides. Luisa, lovely to see you. Thank you so much for being with us here on the programme. A reaction perhaps first to the exit polls, to what we understand so far is happening today in those elections.
Well, we are all feeling a lot. It is absolutely terrifying to see 20 or so percentages for the AfD, which means every fifth voter voted far right or right extremist. And that is obviously a disaster for our democracy. There's huge joy on the left side of things, which is very unexpected for many of us. And I think most of us really share the concern that we just don't really know where Germany is heading right now. And that's quite, that's a problem.
Well, that's what we're discussing right here in the studio, that it could be just more campaign messages and more toxic squabbling as of tomorrow. But when it comes to the young voter, I was reading that first-time voters, 27% of them voted left and 19% AfD. What were the issues on young people's minds coming into these elections?
Most young people really shared one thing, that they were worried about everything, coming from their future to their own personal perspectives, jobs, social security, wars and geopolitics. Climate is a top priority for young people as well. And people are scared, and what young scared people are doing is what this polling is showing us tonight. They're voting for change, whatever change means for them. And I think many young people are, including myself, are hugely disappointed with the election campaign, which failed, in my understanding, completely to really take young people seriously and talk about young people's concerns.
You said young people want change, Luisa Neubauer, but it looks like Friedrich Merz, the CDU Spitzenkandidat, will be the next Chancellor of Germany. Will he represent what you want?
No, not at all. Friedrich Merz in the last 2 months managed to disappoint a majority of the country when for the first time seeking a majority with the far right in the Bundestag, which has never happened since the Second World War. Millions of us were marching on the streets condemning that shift to the right. And just last night, Friedrich Merz had the audacity to stand up on his last election speech and call all of us leftist dummies and really talk about a majority of the country like there was a left radical minority that nobody should care about. Friedrich Merz has failed at all in any sense to win people's trust, to win the trust of women and young people. And so far, we are quite curious how he's going to manage to transform into someone who can actually represent our country as a chancellor, because that so far we haven't seen very much.
And should the Greens go into coalition with him?
To be fair, right now we don't know anything in terms of coalitions, and I can't really take it seriously when now candidates go up and talk about all the different ways in which they do not want to form coalitions. We are not in this land of milk and honey right now in Germany right now. We will have to compromise on everything. I think the election tonight has shown for civil society that a lot of work is ahead of us, and initiatives when it comes to social security, women's rights, and first and foremost climate. Those initiatives will have to come from the streets. They will have to come from civil society, because right now we can't know for sure at all that our future chancellor will deliver on any of that.
Okay, Luisa Neubauer, German climate activist there, the face of the Friday for Future's German movement. Thank you so much for sharing your views and your perspectives with us here live on Euronews. A very gloomy perspective here we're hearing there from Luisa Neubauer, who's representing thousands of young German people tonight who do not think Friedrich Merz is the man that will represent how they want their country to go. And it's interesting, Klaus, because here in Brussels we've always traditionally looked at Germans and Germany as where everything works and where you do everything perfectly right, and now everything seems to be falling apart, and you're not used to this either.
So in a way, I liked what Luisa said. Friedrich Merz disappointed the majority of the Germans. That's in a way true, because he has only 28% of the votes. And I did work on the numbers. So on the left side, if you add all these numbers, you have 16, 28, and the 9 of the Linke. So it's 37% of left-wing voters in Germany. And from my perspective, congratulations, and have a good week, Friedrich Merz, because we had a nice preview right now what the topics are he have to deal with and what the topics are he have to deliver in the end. And it will be a really, really difficult thing if he is forced to have a coalition with the Greens. Because for every conservative voter in Germany, the Greens are in a way absolutely unbelievable, and you cannot do anything with them. And if he now, when I'm talking about it, thinking about it, if he really would have to do a coalition with the Greens, it seems like a betrayal to a lot of his voters. So what does it mean for him to deal with the results now correctly? Because it's true that CDU or CSU voters don't want a coalition with the AfD, but for sure they don't want a coalition with the Greens. And in this kind of situation, I cannot see that it will be very fast. Maybe you are, with your experience, are right that sometimes a phenomenon or an external thing, external pressure, forces you to be fast. And in this constellation, I cannot see it.
Well, indeed, as you say, the Greens did not exclude working with Friedrich Merz, and that indeed could have cost them votes to the left. I don't know if, Charles-Michel, you have tips as a Belgian veteran politician on how he can manoeuvre his way out of this one.
No, I have the impression that now he will have to identify on the programme what are the fundamental points for his political party and where he thinks it's possible to give some concessions to some possible partners. Indeed, I do not underestimate all the difficulties. Once again, and I have this experience, I know that it takes time before we can build trust on a common program or on a joint action. But because of the global circumstances, I think it's not business as usual. And I think that the people in Germany, I suppose, they will expect their political parties, their authorities, their chancellor to be very active very quickly, because I feel and I think that the people, including Germany, they understand very well that what is done or what is not done at the European Union's level because of Germany, it could have a very negative impact in their daily life. And this is probably the pressure that could be exercised to have a certain influence on the path of those negotiations talks. And I think that the best way is as soon as possible to identify what are the pillars for a coalition program and what could be the possible reasonable concessions on all sides to make possible a government working very quickly in the interest of Germany and in the interest, I hope, of the European Union.
So I have another concern, because you know it much better than we do. You need, in a way, a positive momentum for creating a really, really good, progressive or powerful government. And this is a coalition of losers, huh? Because Friedrich Merz has won 4%, but he would have needed 30 plus. So he's a loser. The Social Democrats lost 10% and have the worst result ever in the history. Losers. The Greens lost almost 3%. Losers. Where should this positive energy should be?
Well, I'll tell you who the winners are tonight. The German citizens, 84% of them went out to vote today. It's the highest voter turnout since 1990.
That means a lot, and they get a coalition of losers, and that means a lot of people, more people than ever, were motivated to vote.
And despite the challenges,
and in the end, the system creates a very difficult situation. And because we love and like this system, and we want to support this system, it's for every Democrat in Germany today a very, very difficult evening.
Yeah, but you have also, I don't want to be too optimistic, and I want to be realistic.
I don't want to be too pessimistic.
But I also want to fuel this debate. You have also some examples where a government, even a chancellor, a prime minister, can start his mandate in a difficult position for various reasons. But because of the circumstances, because of the way he managed things, it can be in a position to win and to develop more support from the people, more legitimacy and more authority to act at the internal level, but also at the external level.
I think there are also the leadership. You mentioned this, Klaus, about what type of leadership, and there are different leadership styles I've seen around the world. And one would be to say, yes, we are a government, we will do everything. We said we will negotiate behind doors, we'll have policies and so on. The other would be to actually try to mobilize the society, the forces, work with them, the stakeholders, really bring them in, because they will be a unifying force, or at least maybe there will be differences, but they can bring possibly consensus in some areas where some changes could be made.
And on that point,
and that's where youth should also be brought in, because they are the generation, I think historically, is in humanity's time, the biggest challenge.
Indeed, and
ever.
as we heard earlier, Germany is ageing. But let's just go over to Berlin now and bring in Liv Schraut, our correspondent, who's reporting live for us tonight at the headquarters of the CDU. She has a guest with her, Hildegard Bentele.
Thank you very much, Maeve. Yes, we are here with Hildegard Bentele again. And firstly, we're going to start with a question, which is, how do you feel about the results?
Well, we have won the elections, and very probably Friedrich Merz will be the next German Chancellor. This is what we are glad about. But we would have expected more, to be very honest. And we rely on a strong result from Bavaria. It is really very good. We would have loved to see a 3 as first number, and we're still hoping for the evening. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And what are your hopes for the coalition building?
Well, I very much hope that one partner will be enough. I think this is the biggest hope, everybody here, because we know from the past with 2 partners it's going to be very complicated. And because then we would have the same problems like in the last government. So we very much hope that we stay as strong as we are, and that, I mean, this is the big question, if the Liberals and the BSV will climb over the threshold or not. So we actually have to hope that the Liberals stay below the threshold.
Thank you very much. And which policy are you most looking forward to the CDU implementing?
Well, the most important issue will be the economy, because we have to decrease the bureaucratic burden. We have to lower the taxes. And in addition, we have to make progress on migration politics. I think with the Social Democrats, foreign affairs, defense will be very difficult. So we look for the first common points, I think, in economy and in migration.
Thank you. And what do you think that Friedrich Merz is going to bring that has been missing for the past couple of years?
Well, I think he will look for a stronger role in Europe. This is what he made clear on various occasions. He knows about the German leadership, which is missing. And in this regard, I have big trust, because he used to be member of the European Parliament a while ago. And this is deeply rooted in him. This I've seen during the all campaign and all his walk until he has done until now. He's a very true European, and he knows about the international context in which these elections take place.
Thank you so much, Hildegard. Then handing back to you, Maeve. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Liv Straud there, and her guest, CDU member and member of the European Parliament, Hildegard Bentele, outlining there the challenges for Friedrich Merz as Chancellor, saying that he will have to focus on the economy and also on various issues like migration. Now, of course, we do have an EU migration pact that, Charles Michel, you will be very well took years and years and years to work on, to negotiate during the trilogues here, and also then was endorsed. So why is there still this perception that we have a massive migration crisis?
There are 2 different elements. On the one hand, there is the migration pact. It's a way to organize the solidarity and the common rules within the EU. But there's another element, in my view, maybe more important. This is how we deal with external partners. And this is the external dimension of migration. And here I think that the last years we have made some progress, because we engage much more in a European way with partners outside of the European Union. But it's not perfect, and there is a lot to do, and certainly we need also to work with the United Nations, with the international organizations, to make sure that we find a way, on the one hand, to respect the international law and the humanitarian and the international humanitarian law, point one, but on the other hand, that we are efficient, that we are effective, that we are operational, because sometimes there could be some confrontations between the jurisprudence at the international level and some concrete decisions that are required in order to be operational, to be more effective. If I take the example of the return policy, this is a big challenge in many of our countries. For that, we need more cooperation with third countries and with international organizations.
I think that is key, isn't it? Making sure the return policy works, and those who don't have a right to stay can be sent back to their country. Migration, this has been probably the most toxic issue that the EU has had to deal with for so many years. We see how it steeps into every political debate. We're seeing now in Germany, a country that has 9 land borders, if I'm correct. Many politicians calling for checks and to actually close the borders there. Where would that leave Schengen? The EU's, of course, beloved Schengen, which means that we can travel passport free to many EU countries to make life easier for us.
Well, it's on the one hand, it's heartbreaking to see people crossing the Mediterranean and becoming a graveyard for so many. At the same time, there is certain capacity that each society has to be able to integrate numbers of people, and there have been large numbers that are the incapacity to integrate has created ghettos, has created inequalities, has created fear and insecurity also. And so I think this is a dilemma. We have to be clear that these are not simple solutions. So the simple solution to close borders is basically a narrowing of the mind. That's not going to solve the problem. As I mentioned earlier in this program, I had actually created a fence up in northern Greece when I was Prime Minister to regulate. I knew that, however, this was not going to solve the problem. And a few years later, we had millions and millions coming through. And we will have huge amount of pressure from other countries. So what Charles was saying here is very important. Who are the people we are working with, and how are we going to deal with them? And it's partly also our neighborhood policies. Africa is there. Why don't we work more closely with Africa? I would even say there are some areas with China where we can work together. I'm not sort of a China basher. I have my problems, as others. Europe has its problems, but they are investing in China. Why are we so afraid? Why don't we work together? And actually, there have been some elements, so let's say in Senegal, where France, China, and the EU have worked together, and the investment has gone very well. And we can put the certain rules which we want to put for the what kind of investments to make them sustainable, to make them, worker rights and human rights and so on. So I think we have to again rethink this and see how we work together. And I would add that this. The issue of enlargement of the European Union also has to do with how we will deal with migration too.
And that's a debate that is fascinating that we'll come back to in just a couple of minutes here. But let's head over to Euronews' newsroom, where our analysts Marit Gwynne-Jones and Stefan Kobe are standing by to bring us some more analysis and data on the election outcome of those federal Bundestag elections that were taking place today in Germany.
Yeah, thank you very much, Maeve. And we like that you talked about migration, because we also like to talk about migration, but it's a different topic here. We talk about voter migration. So people who voted differently today than they did 4 years ago in 2021. And here are some very interesting results. And if we go, for instance, to the Social Democrats, obviously one of the big losers of the night. We see here the bulk of SPD voters that left their party went to Friedrich Merz and the CDU. All the others benefited from a loss of confidence in the SPD. So what is interesting here is that the Social Democrats lost basically across the board, mostly to the CDU, a little less to the AfD, although I was suggesting that earlier. But here we are. This is not a one-time thing. This is a massive move back away from the Social Democrats to all the other parties in the Bundestag, Marit.
Yes, and Stefan, we could be analysing this all night. It's so fascinating. But let's take a look at where AfD has taken voters from. So people who did vote for the AfD today didn't vote for them in 2021. We can see here a big portion of non-voters in 2021 have gone out and cast their ballot for the AfD today. It suggests that they've done something well in their campaign to convince people who are maybe disenchanted with politics, perhaps not as much engaged in voting before, to actually go out and vote for them. As Stefan said, they've also taken votes from across the board, really, but mainly from the SPD, the FDP, and the CDU-CSU. This is interesting as well. A lot of the centre-right voters have decided to shift further right and cast their vote for AfD, so fascinating.
Yeah, what is interesting here is the portion of FDP voters that ended up with the AfD, because you wouldn't think that this is the same electorate. The AfD, the FDP, the Liberals, the party of Christian Lindner, there we are, is the party of the Mittelstand, small and mid-sized companies. It's the party of doctors, of lawyers, of free professions, as we call them.
Perhaps
not necessarily in line with the AfD program, but here we are. And of course, a lot of voters of the Liberals ended up with the CDU. So they're
more expected.
Right, that was kind of expected. It was kind of the same political family.
And if we briefly, Stefan, look at the CDU-CSU, Obviously, this is an interesting picture as well, because a lot of the SPD voters have migrated there as well. Suggests that there's a disenchantment with the centre-right and this feeling, let's give this, the centre-left and let's give the centre-right a chance. The same trend a little bit with the FDP as well. So we see that there has been a successful attempt from the CDU-CSU to grab voters from the other parties as well. We'll probably have more on voter migration for you a bit later, Maeve. There's so much to dig into here, but for now, back to you.
Ah, she's not connected. Mara Gwynne-Jones there and Stefan Kobe with all the latest there. A reaction to what you just heard there, Klaus Strunz?
Yeah, I'm interested in this voters' behavior of the Social Democrat voters, because obviously the fight for the normal people, I quote now Jürgen Klopp, who calls him as a normal...
Or Olaf Scholz, no?
Yeah, no, for the normal people, the SPD has lost. So normal people are now thinking they are more closer, and it's a new home feeling with this AfD, and that's really an indicator of absolutely worse politics in the last years, more than the last 3 years of the Social Democrats, because that's an amazing thing. You can say a lot of things against Social Democrats, but you have honored them for being against Nazis absolutely strictly in every time period, and that their voters decide that they are better served by a far-right, partly extremist party from the right. That's, I think, if I would be Olaf Scholz or Lars Klingbeil, who's the leader of the SPD, that would make me very, very sad.
Well, it's a phenomenon we see also in France. If you look at the results of the European Parliament elections, where the party of Marine Le Pen and Jordan Bardella, another TikTok sensation, did extremely well. And on that point of France, we can actually bring in our Paris correspondent now, Sophia Kasankova, who's in the French capital for us tonight. Thank you so much for being with us live here on our show, Germany Decides. Sophia, what is the temperature like there in Paris tonight? Have we heard any official reactions from the Élysée Palace on these elections?
No, Maeve, no official reaction just yet from the Élysée Palace, but obviously I'll keep an eye out and I will keep updating you whenever that comes in. But first, I just want to show you, I'm currently standing here on the Place de la Bastille, the Bastille Square, where a protest, a pro-Ukrainian one, just ended a few minutes ago. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, as well as the tense geopolitical context, are both common preoccupations for both Germany and France alike. And that's why here in Paris, tonight's election results are clearly being watched by the Élysée Palace. And that's because for Macron, he hopes that Olaf Scholz's likely successor, Friedrich Merz, will put the Franco-German relationship back on its feet after years of tense relations between Scholz and Macron. Just as a reminder, back in January, Merz even said that he was determined to use the remaining 2 years of Macron's presidential mandate to work towards a common vision of a more sovereign Europe, which is an idea that was warmly welcomed here by the Élysée Palace. And finally, Merz also promised that his first trip as future chancellor would be a one-day visit to both Warsaw and Paris, which is another sign of a possible thawing of Franco-German relations. Back to you, Maeve.
You mentioned the Franco-German alliance, the Franco-German engine that's been driving potentially the European Union for so long. All eyes on that tomorrow as we see Emmanuel Macron, the French president, head over to Washington, D.C. for talks. He'll be accompanied by Keir Starmer, the UK Prime Minister, but no German, of course, counterpart on that trip. What is President Macron hoping to get out of these talks?
Well, just as you said, Maeve, Macron really spearheading Europe's attempt to try to shore up as much support for Ukraine and its embattled President Volodymyr Zelensky. Since Saturday, it's been a diplomatic ballet in Washington, D.C., first starting on Saturday with Polish President Duda meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump. Tomorrow it's going to be French President Macron. And as you mentioned, on Thursday, it will be British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. All of them will be trying to put Europe back at the center of these high-stakes Ukraine peace negotiations at a moment when the talks are currently being held bilaterally between the U.S. and Russia. So this is why the results of tonight in Germany are so important for Macron as well as for the rest of Europe. A stronger Franco-German relationship could potentially tip the balance in these peace negotiations if Europe's first economy, which is Germany, stands with France, the EU, and also with Ukraine. Back to you, Brussels.
Sofia Kasankova, thank you so much for that live update from the French capital, from Paris, and pointing out and stressing how the world is moving on without Germany. And that's what we heard from Friedrich Merz as well say earlier as he spoke to his supporters, that the world will not wait for us to form a coalition. We need to do it fairly fast. But just if you have just joined us, it's just 8 o'clock here. You're live on Euronews watching Germany Decides, Euronews' live special election show, breaking down the results and the exit polls of the Bundestag snap elections that took place today in Germany. If you want more deep analysis as well and to crunch those figures for yourself, we have a live blog running all night long as well on Euronews.com. And meanwhile, we're taking a look at the wider impact this will all have on the European Union with our guests here in the studio, Klaus Strunz, the editorial director of Euronews. We're also joined by Charles Michel, former president of the European Council, and also George Papandreou, former Prime Minister of Greece and now very active in the Council of Europe as the rapporteur on democracy. So we're having fascinating discussions here on the future of the European Union and all that's at stake for the world in this very turbulent time for geopolitics. And on that note, we can bring in now the perspective of Silvana Koch-Marin. She is the former Vice President of the European Parliament. She is also a former member of the FDP, so the pro-business Liberal Party, and now she heads up a global network promoting women in politics. So Silvana, thank you so much for joining us once again live here on Euronews. First, your reaction now at 8 o'clock to the exit polls and to now the challenge that faces Friedrich Merz in actually cobbling together a coalition.
Well, happy to be here. And well, the way it looks now is that a coalition indeed between Friedrich Merz, CDU, CSU and the Social Democrats is enough to form a government. Right now, but who knows? I mean, we're at 4.9 with the Liberals. But I would say even if the Liberals get in to form a coalition, there needs to be a leadership change in the Liberal Party, because we saw how the former the former government broke up because of an atmosphere of mistrust, and there was no team play, no teamwork. So I believe if there would be a coalition that includes the Liberals, this can only happen constructively if there's a new leadership. And there's great people in this party. And if they don't get into parliament, well, you know, it's time to reset and maybe dig out the core liberal heart again of this party.
Challenging.
So you think the course has run out for Christian Lindner, the current head of the FDP. What names would you suggest then that should fill his shoes?
For example, there was a great Secretary General, Linda Teuteberg. She is re-elected to Parliament if they're in, and she's a very constructive and very much team play oriented politician. There is the very well-known leader of the German Liberals in the European Parliament, Agnes Strack-Zimmermann. Those names immediately come to mind, but there are others too, of course, which will be then a longer process to define.
And just one final question. Friedrich Merz, when he was out campaigning over the last couple of months in what in fact was a very short campaign, proposed the idea of having more women than men in the cabinet. How would that look, and what kind of policies would that mean, having more women in his cabinet?
Well, it's great he says that because there's very few women candidates who got elected for the CDU into the parliament. So if he wants to make up for sort of that deficit by bringing more women into government, fantastic. Again, there are plenty very capable, very competent women also in the CDU. Very sadly so, they weren't put up as candidates by their parties. So Friedrich Merz, if he wants to have a top-down approach and say, well, I take the best people, for sure, he should have more women than men.
Silvana Cockmarin, thank you so much for joining us tonight here live on Euronews on our special election show all about those major votes over in Germany. A lot at stake, of course, for the European Union, Charles-Michel, for the future of the European Union, the immediate future, with so much going on right now, as you said earlier as well, budget talks coming up very soon. How do you think this town will be reacting tomorrow morning when we have more certainty and more clarity on the outcome?
I think that the hope on the European Union side will be to have a government as soon as possible. We don't underestimate the time that will be needed, but it is important to make sure that we make decisions in Europe. Point two, what is going on with the talks that have started between the United States and Russia, it will force the European Union to be clear, and I hope to be united in order to have more influence. And we can see that some European leaders, Emmanuel Macron and some others, they are talking to Donald Trump. It's very important that we defend the European interest. If discussions are going on the security of the European continent, on the future of Ukraine, we have to be around the table and we have to defend our legitimate interests. And for that, Germany is playing and has to play a very important role together with some other member states. A positive element is the fact that Friedrich Merz many times in the past has been very clear about his European commitment and his European engagement, and I hope that it will be something that will be clear as soon as possible, because even without waiting for a coalition in Germany, it should be possible to express some clear official positions from those who are supposed to be in charge in the near future in Germany.
Well, let's ask one of them. We can actually head straight over now to Berlin and bring in Liv Straudt, our correspondent, who is with the German MEP, well-known MEP, David McAllister from the CDU party. Liv, over to you. Liv is having a little technical issue there, trying to connect with us here live on Euronews. We'll bring her in just 1 minute. She'll be speaking to David McAllister, German MEP, known, of course, as being the head of the Foreign Affairs Committee. But just picking up on what Charles-Michel said there about what's at stake here when it comes to Donald Trump being in the White House. Charles-Michel said earlier, this is a chance for Europe to be able to get together, speak in one voice.
Absolutely. I think we are dealing with two very important words when it comes to this relationship. It's unity and diversity. So the United States forever promised we are strong together. It's a big unity, and the wonderful German value system is being united in diversity. And now is the moment where the diversity people have to show unity, because otherwise it's not possible to be a partner in this so immensely important issues we have ahead of us. So it's maybe a more unity period for the diverse European country.
Bit of a tongue twister there, but absolutely on that point, we will just bring in Liv Straudt, who's managed to fix her technical issues, and we can bring in Liv Straudt now. She's at the CDU headquarters for us all night, and she's now with David McAllister, the German MEP, to hear as well his perspective on the outcome for the CDU and the CSU tonight. Liv, over to you.
Thank you very much, Maeve. Here we are with David McAllister, and thank you very much, David, for being with us this evening. So, which policy are you most looking forward to of the CDU's being implemented for the next couple of years?
Well, first of all, this is a great night for the German CDU and CSU and for Friedrich Merz. We have the mandate to form the next German government, and I'm very sure that Friedrich Merz will be the next Chancellor. But how the next German government will look like, we simply can't say tonight, because we still don't know how exactly the Bundestag will be composed. Of course, this then is important for the possible options we have. But one thing is clear, we want a stable government in Berlin. The sooner, the better.
And do you think the results this evening signal that Europe will also be in a stronger capital?
Germany is one of 27 EU member states, but Germany is the largest member state and we have the strongest economy. That's why, of course, Germany plays an important role in Europe. And what we've seen in the last 3.5 years was simply Germany being far too absent from the European policy debate in Brussels. This urgently has to change, and Friedrich Merz has announced that from day one of his chancellorship, Germany will play a more active role again in Europe.
Thank you very much, David. Okay, we're handing back to the studio. Thank you very much, Maeve.
Thank you, Liv Straud there, and to her guest, David McAllister, who normally can be spotted roaming the corridors of the European Parliament here in Brussels and, of course, in Strasbourg. But tonight he's where he should be, where the action is, of course, over in Berlin. And he made an interesting point there about Germany being the strongest economy and, of course, the lack of German leadership over the last couple of years. But one woman that we haven't mentioned here tonight is Angela Merkel and her 16 years in power. Is it since that she left office, is suddenly things started to fall apart?
Well, I had a good personal relationship with Angela Merkel, but we did have our differences as to how we would deal with the economic crisis. And I think we have some lessons to be learned from that economic crisis. When we showed our common strength, we could deal with the markets. That was the market failure at the time, and banking failure. Of course, Greece had its problems. Greece had to be reformed. As a matter of fact, I was telling Angela Merkel, I don't want your money. I simply want you to make sure that I can get access to the markets from bond markets. And when Draghi came in 2 or 3 years later, that's what he did. Basically, he said, I'm not going to let the speculation coming. I'm going to do whatever it takes. And, of course, then Italy and Spain were at the brink of possibly going bankrupt, or at least having to access the stability mechanism. And he came out and he said, we're going to buy your bonds if necessary. We're going to hit the market and make sure, and also give the market a sense of confidence. So I think what came out of that was, there was partly the austerity issue, which many people talk about the budget break. Well, will Germany be able to deal with that? Investment borrowing is not necessarily bad if you invest in the good things and necessary things, and we do need to invest. Europe needs to invest. Secondly, what came out of that, of course, was I think a sequel to that became the migration issue, because when we had so much demagoguery against each other, how can you be bedfellows with these lazy Greeks and so on, and who were doing this and that? How can you bring in even others from other countries? And I think this created a sense of lack of solidarity. When we were doing reforms, when we were making changes, I was doing it. I was hearing a lot. We have to be punished, and this, of course, created a sense of this helped build demagoguery and populism in many parts of the world, but I think many parts of Europe. At the same time, the financial crisis also created huge inequalities. So even though we bailed out the banks, what we are seeing now is we are seeing more wealth to the few. We are seeing high inequality. Even Germany has quite high inequality if you look at the statistics. Even a country like Sweden has high inequality, and these in many ways are correlated to the xenophobic fears, because it's an insecurity for jobs, precarious jobs. You're not sure what AI is going to bring, a lot of automation. Of course, and if you add climate change and if you add the issues of the wars and so on and geopolitics, this insecurity is fodder for these types of demagogic politicians. So we need to really think of, and that's why you get the anti-establishment vote in one way or another. You saw the youth went some to AfD, some to Die Linke. Yeah. But that means that's a symptom. We have to look at the problem. What is the cause? And I think this is where we need reform. So it's needed that Germany does become again a very important engine of economic growth in new technologies, in climate change technologies, in digital technologies, and so on. It's also absurd, absolutely absurd, that we're talking about European security without Europeans, and we're talking about Ukraine peace plan without Ukraine. Yep. And that is going to be an historical, not maybe a death knell, but terrible development for Europe, if we are not at the table. So this is where we need to be united.
George Papandreou there with some fascinating insights into recent EU history and of course Greece, and referring to that famous statement of Mario Draghi as well, that he would do whatever it takes. That's of course what has gained him his name as Super Mario. On that point, if you've just joined us, we're here live on Euronews, digesting and dissecting the outcome and the exit polls of the Bundestag snap elections that took place today in Germany. It's of course up to the Bundestag then to elect the Chancellor. But for more on that, we can bring in our expert analysts, Mairead Gwynne-Jones and Stefan Krobe, who've been crunching the numbers and digesting all that so they can inform us now. Over to you.
Yes, thank you, Maeve. A lot of digesting tonight for both of us. So here we have an update, the freshest update that we have. And according to these projections here, the CDU, CSU, the Christian Democrats and the Friedrich Merz come in first with 28.4%, followed by the far-right AFD party, 20.4%. The Social Democrats under Chancellor Olaf Scholz, 16.4%. The Greens under Economy Minister Robert Habeck, 12.2%. And then a little surprise here, Die Linke coming into the Bundestag, scoring 8.9%. The other smaller parties, the Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht, left populist type of list, having 5% now. This is very likely a rounded number, so they're not in the parliament. The same goes for the business-friendly Liberals, the FDP, the former partner of the Social Democrats and the Greens in the traffic light government, only scoring 4.8%, so they will not be represented in the 21st Bundestag.
And as we've said throughout the night, it's been a tough night for the SPD, the Greens and the FDP. We were looking very closely throughout the night at those three small parties. Die Linke safely into the Bundestag, question marks around the Sarah Wagenknecht alliance as well as the FDP, but likely they might not make it. What does all this mean? There will be difficult coalition negotiations ahead because Friedrich Merz and his Christian Democrats and Christian Social Union, the Bavarian sister party, will have to probably rely on not one, but two parties to form a coalition government. We're looking at a potential black, red, perhaps even green Kenya coalition. Who knows? That could be one of the options explored over the coming weeks as they enter these tough coalition talks. That's the picture we have from tonight. Weeks and months ahead until we know who will govern Germany, who will become Chancellor. But there will be celebrations, certainly at the CDU camp and definitely at the AfD camp tonight. So, Stefan?
Yeah, well, but what is interesting here is that if you won tonight's election, if you gain seats, it doesn't mean that you have a bright political future. Let's take a look. So the Christian Democrats, yes, they gained 4.3%. They will form the next governor, the next chancellor. They will be certainly in government. The Social Democrats with the worst result in history, minus 9.3%. They will be in the new government, very likely, as will the Greens, who also lost 2.5%. On the other hand, those who can claim to be one of the winners of tonight's election, like the AfD, who gained a 10%, doubling their score to 20.4%, it doesn't matter whether they had 5, 10, 12% or 20%, they will not be represented in the new government. And Die Linke, a strong showing, particularly in East Germany, 8.9%. Nobody had that on their radar. Certainly we did not. That is quite a surprise. But that doesn't bring them anything of substance in the new Bundestag, and of course the smaller parties out. So it's a mixed picture of winners and losers, and we'll see what the next weeks will bring. Maeve, thank you so much.
Certainly will. Thank you so much, Stefan Krobe and Mairead Gwynne-Jones, for breaking down all those figures for us and analysing what this will mean for Germany and, of course, for the European Union over the next couple of weeks and months. Some final thoughts from our esteemed panel. Clive, what would you see the headline tomorrow on Euronews, digesting all this?
Speed measures. because that's maybe now the biggest task. And I did some things for myself. It's a possibility that it's possible for the CDU-CSU to have a coalition with only the Social Democrats. If the Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht will not enter the parliament, it's maybe enough to have 29 and 16% to get the majority of the seats in the parliament. And that could be the fundament of a quick coalition thing, because then it's totally clear there is a winner, a new chancellor, there is a loser, the SPD, but they are in the government, so both could be motivated to do this job like we wish.
Okay, Klaus Tron, speed matters. George Papandreou.
I would say speed too, but at the same time do it in a strategic way for Europe. We are facing major challenges, and the issues of our European existence are on the table. This is it is necessary to really think about how Europe is going to be moving forward. So yes, a government in Germany, but this also has to mean the big issues that we really have to deal with in changing Europe for the better, more unified, more strong, and more confident, because I think we are sometimes less confident about what Europe can do. When we are united, that's my experience, whether it's been the financial crisis or it's COVID or whatever, we can be powerful and make decisions that matter in the world and for our European citizens.
That's music to your ears. Now, Charles Michel, I guess just a final comment to complement that.
Yes, an electoral moment is always a special moment for a political party, for a country. I remember in 2014, when I won the elections, the day I became Prime Minister following those elections, I thought this is the beginning of the problems, and I was right. And the impression is a bit similar for my friends in Germany. But having said that, more seriously, I would say that indeed Germany has a serious responsibility, because it's the largest economy, because of the role played by Germany at the European Union's level, and we trust and we count on Germany and the German political leadership to make the right choices. And indeed, I have the impression that in the months to come, in the years to come, we will face some taboos that we'll have to probably to put aside to make new decisions, innovative decisions. We have discussed a lot Ukraine, the security in Europe. We have not discussed a lot the tariffs that Donald Trump intends to put in place, and it means that in that field it will be extremely important to have a strong political leadership all across the European Union, including in Germany.
And of course, on the tariffs front, it's keeping the EU Trade Commissioner, Maros Sefcovic, very busy. So on those conclusions, we count on Germany and speed matters. We can bring this conversation to an end. Klaus Strunz, thank you so much for being our guest tonight. George Papandreou and Charles Michel, thank you so much as well to all our correspondents in Germany and of course over in Paris, our crew over at the Euronews newsroom, and also our live bloggers.
Agriculture sector, academia, rural communities and civil society. And these conclusions will shape the community.
On Euronews.
$5 million less than in 2005. Almost 2/3 of these farms were small operations with less than 5 hectares in size. EU farms used 157 million hectares of land for agricultural production in 2020, 38% of the total land area of the EU.
These numbers show that the food supply chain in Europe is based on rather small enterprises on the farmer side. By contrast, there are a few large companies acting, dominating the market as buyers. So, how does that imbalance shape a small farmer's life?
Well, what is to be taken into account in the first place is the wide diversity and the wide complexity in the whole agri-food chain. You have very large farms that are usually very well on the market. A number of them are also export-driven. And they are usually quite profitable. On the other hand, you have a multitude of very fragmented, very small farms that are struggling, and those are the ones that need most attention or most help.
By nature, the farmer is weaker in this bargaining power. It has always been and will be. it's a little bit about the size of the company, but it's also the matter of our products that are often quite fresh and seasonal. We got the UTP directive, which we welcomed, and we also now welcome the review of that.
A lot of attention has been placed on unfair trading practices legislations. But one needs to understand that those laws, they state in contracts what a farmer and a buyer can agree and what they cannot. What we should say is that those laws are not a silver bullet. You really need to look at the whole agri-food ecosystem and strengthening the players in that ecosystem in the first place.
It's not only justified, it's necessary. One way of strengthening the farmer in the food chain is by working in cooperatives or in producer organizations. And we are very much looking forward to the continued work of these proposals that have come from the Commission now.
Retailers in particular, they want to have their shelves full for consumers to come and visit them, and they want to have choice, and they want to have good prices. And for that, you need to have well-functioning supply chains. When conflicts occur, then you have mechanisms for the state or the government to intervene, but these systems should be there and used only in a last resort. Between when the conflict is too bad.
I think it's important that there are some sort of ombudsman or some organization that can mediate this. We also see that different countries have adopted this legislation in different ways. There's also a problem. So I think it's important that the whole Europe take a responsibility for that.
A major concern of European farmers is that their margins have been eroded by surging prices of inputs, such as fertilizers and plant protection products, that ultimately increase their production costs. Whether the latest initiative from Brussels helps them attain a stronger position within the food supply chain remains to be seen.
Your next news bulletin on Euronews is coming up in under 2 minutes.
Exit polls say CDU's Friedrich Merz leads and far-right AfD made historic gains as Socialist Democrats slid back to third place.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says Russia's attack on Saturday night was the largest drone attack on the country since Russia's war began.
Vladimir Putin praises soldiers fighting in the war in Ukraine as defending the future of Russia.
This was the moment when CDU supporters heard the first prognosis based on exit polls for the federal election in Germany. The Christian Democrat Party and its candidate Friedrich Merz is expected to get around 28.5% of the votes, which will make them the strongest party in the newly elected Bundestag. Alternative for Germany, the far-right party, which no other group wants to collaborate with, is in second place with 20% of the votes. AfD followers also cheered and applauded in Berlin as exit poll results were read out. The exit polls also show German Chancellor Olaf Scholz's center-left Social Democrats on track for their worst post-war result in a national parliamentary election. They are expected to finish in third place with 16.5%, followed by the Greens with 12% and the far-left Linke with 9%. The liberal FDP and leftist BSW both at 5%, a precarious position because if they slip under 5% after the actual count, they will not be represented in the Bundestag. But if they do, this might change the whole dynamic of the negotiations for the coalition.
Authorities in Ukraine say Russia attacked the country on Saturday night with a barrage of drones that President Zelensky called the single biggest assault since Moscow's invasion began almost 3 years ago. A record 267 Russian drones were launched, according to Ukraine's Air Force Command. Emergency services reported destruction in several regions overnight.
Повиходили, всі цілі, діти цілі. Почали роздивлятися руйнування. Вікна, дах, автівки.
The strikes came on the eve of the third anniversary of the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said it was the largest drone attack on the country since Russia began using Iranian-made drones.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has praised soldiers fighting in the war in Ukraine on the eve of the third anniversary of the start of the conflict. In a video message released for the annual Defender of the Fatherland Day, Putin referred to Russian service personnel as the main heroes. He said they were risking their lives to defend Russia and its national interests. Putin also pledged greater support for military personnel and new weapons and equipment for the front line. In a ceremony in Moscow, he presented medals to soldiers who have fought in Ukraine. Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine was launched partly from Russian territory and partly from Belarus in 2022. Last year, the Wall Street Journal estimated that 250,000 people had been killed in Ukraine and 800,000 others wounded. Almost 4 million people have been internally displaced inside Ukraine and more than 6 million refugees have been recorded globally.
Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán has promised economic reforms and a radical political program in a combative annual assessment speech emboldened by the Trump presidency. Orbán called high inflation unacceptable and instructed the Minister of National Economy to reach an agreement with supermarket chains to curb prices. He also announced a new development project called the 100 New Factories program and promised what he called Europe's biggest tax cut for families, granting substantial cuts for families with children. Under the plan, mothers with 2 children or more would pay no income tax for the rest of their lives. On Ukraine, he said the future of the country lied in becoming a buffer zone with no prospect of becoming a NATO member.
As to whether the country will join the European Union, he said the Hungarians will decide, and that Ukraine would never become an EU member, said against Hungary's wishes. Orban also announced changes to the constitution, setting in stone that a person can only be either a man or a woman.
Participants, 130 countries.
How to lift up their growth.
The wake-up call for Europe, we should do our own work.
Welcome to this episode of The Big Question from Davos.
Vamos a seguir trabajando fuertemente.
For the EU is a moment of truth.
Доброго дня. Thank you so much. There's a lot of food for thought.
Welcome you to Barry's Piano Bar.
For Euronews from Davos.
Balance disorders are one of the symptoms of multiple sclerosis, a greatly misunderstood disease with all too visible effects. Fondation France Sclérose en Plaques, together to cure.
Wow, ganz schön was los hier. Die Republik Estland reformiert das Schulsystem. Die russischen Schulen werden abgeschafft. Bald werden alle Kinder im ganzen Land nur noch auf Estnisch unterrichtet.
In den baltischen Staaten leben viele Menschen, die Russisch als Muttersprache haben, vor allem in Lettland und Estland. In der estnischen Hauptstadt Tallinn wächst fast jedes zweite Kind mit Russisch auf. Im Nordosten des Landes ist Russisch sogar noch weiter verbreitet.
Ich bin auf dem Weg nach Narva. Estlands drittgrößte Stadt liegt direkt an der Grenze zu Russland. Über 90% der Menschen sprechen Russisch.
Stalin ließ Zehntausende Litauer, Letten und Esten nach Sibirien deportieren. Im Gegenzug wurden Zehntausende Russen im Baltikum angesiedelt. Ethnische Deportationen und Russifizierung gingen Hand in Hand. Die Russifizierung ging auch nach dem Tod Stalins weiter. Es kamen tausende Industriearbeiter und Soldaten, die sich vor allem in den großen Städten ansiedelten. Die Amtssprache in den sowjetisch besetzten Gebieten des Baltikums war Russisch. Mit dem Zusammenbruch der Sowjetunion erlangten Litauen, Lettland und Estland ihre staatliche Unabhängigkeit zurück und Litauisch, Lettisch und Estnisch lösten das Russische als Amtssprache ab. Heute fürchten die baltischen EU-Staaten, dass Putin versuchte, die russischen Minderheiten zu manipulieren. Moskau kontrollierten Sendern wurde nach dem russischen Überfall auf die Ukraine deshalb die Lizenz entzogen. Und Lettland und Estland führen flächendeckend Lettisch und Estnisch als alleinige Unterrichtssprache an allen Schulen ein.
Jüngste Studien in Estland zeigen, fast die Hälfte der russischen Minderheit ist schlecht integriert. Das soll sich mit der Schulreform ändern.
9 von 10 Menschen in Narva haben Russisch als Muttersprache. Die Stadt im Nordosten gehört zu Estland. Mit einer großen Schulreform wird bis 2030 alles auf Estnisch umgestellt.
Ja, was halten die Menschen hier in Narva davon, dass bald der gesamte Schulunterricht auf Estnisch abgehalten wird? Ich höre mich mal in der Stadt um.
Irina holt ihre Tochter Ella von der Schule ab. Statt auf Russisch lernt Ella nun auf Estnisch.
Немножко сложно дома, приходится помогать ученику, так как мы все равно были в русском садике.
Я считаю, что это очень правильно, потому что мы живем в этой стране, и просто нужно знать язык, он нужен везде.
Morgendämmerung. Faina macht sich auf den Weg zur Schule.
nii, täna on uus koolipäev, õues on lumi, hea tuju, kohe tuleb buss ja et siis äkki alustame.
Die Schulreform wird vom Europarat beobachtet. Ziel ist der Schutz von Minderheitenrechten. In Feiners Zuhause wird Russisch gesprochen. Feiner ist die einzige in der Familie, die auch das Estnische fließend beherrscht. Denn sie wechselte von der russischen zur estnischen Schule.
Uus koolipäev, nüüd olen koolis lõpuks, praegu hakkab füüsika.
Das neue Schulgebäude ist gemütlich und modern. Das gilt auch für die Lehrmethoden. Physiklehrerin Kurling setzt auf Gruppenarbeit. Auch sie ist neu hier. Zuvor hat sie das Wasserwerk von Narva geleitet. Kurlings Muttersprache ist Russisch, doch sie unterrichtet auf Estnisch.
Tegelikult me tegeleme oma tundides kohe kahe ainega. Üks aine on nagu oma aine, mida sa annad edasi ja teine asja on eesti keel. Aga aines tunnis peab olema üks keel.
In der Pause reden die Jugendlichen Russisch untereinander. Faina ist eine der gewählten Schülersprecherinnen. Sie erinnert sich noch gut an ihren Wechsel von der russischen zur estnischen Schule.
Esimene aasta oli päris raske minu jaoks. Ei saanud aru midagi, olid päris halvad hinned, aga õpetajad ikkagi toetasid mind ja mul oli väga suur toetus peres.
Das größte Problem ist der Mangel an Lehrern, insbesondere im Nordosten des Landes. Estland investiert massiv in Bildung. Das zahlt sich aus. Im europäischen Bildungsvergleich rangiert das Land ganz weit oben, seit Jahren schon.
It's not only about the language, it's about including culture, it's about including people having real context.
Faina kennt alle Systeme. Die Schulen in Russland, die russischsprachige Schule in Estland und jetzt die estnische Schule.
Tundsin just erinevust inimestes, et isegi õpetajad olid, ma ütleksin, ranged vene koolides, aga Eesti õpetajad on nii-öelda kaasaegsed ja toetavad. Minu arust kunagi ei ole hilja ega vara uue keele õppimiseks.
Großes Thema derzeit in Estland, die Reform der russischen Schulen. Das gesamte Unterrichtssystem wird bis 2030 völlig auf Estnisch umgestellt. Ich bin mit der Bildungsministerin Kristina Kallas verabredet.
Hallo, ich war in ganz Estland unterwegs und habe mit Leuten überall geredet und die haben Fragen, die habe ich Ihnen hier mitgebracht.
Welcome to Estonia.
Thank you. Let's go for the interview. I brought you the first question from the ground. Let's start with the question of Faina.
Miks just alles praegu meie haridussüsteem otsustas minna eestikeelsele õppimisele? Miks mitte äkki 10 aastat tagasi?
So, your answer?
Maybe there was not enough political strength to do it. There was quite severe Russian interference. So in a very sad way, actually, Russian full-scale aggression against Ukraine was a last straw that helped to kind of broke the resistance to this reform.
Why closing all Russian schools in Estonia?
They're still open. It's just that the children will be learning in Estonian, so all schools will be the same, with the same program, with the same language of instruction.
Experts from the United Nations expressed even grave concerns. What is your reaction on that?
My grave concern has been that the Russian language separate education system has been doing really negative results to the Russian kids themselves. Having this completely separate parallel education system resulted in Russian kids graduating from those schools to be completely out of Estonian future education opportunities and the labor market. So we have to reform the school system and give much more equal access to Estonian language education.
Regarding this integration strategy you have, what is the objective?
For the generation born already in independent Estonia, that's a crucial fact that they would be the ones identifying themselves as Estonians and associating themselves with Estonian nationality without abandoning whatever ethnocultural belief of being Russian. So these are not mutually exclusive identities.
Schülerin Faina ist mittlerweile perfekt zweisprachig. Und neben Russisch und Estnisch lernt sie nun auch Deutsch und Englisch. Ihr Traumberuf, eine Karriere als Kinoregisseurin. Faina weiß, wo sie hin will.
space will be everywhere. You cannot live without space. In 20 years from today, €1 invested in space programs brings about €5 back to the economy.
Welcome to The Big Question, the series from Euronews where we explore every corner of the world of business. Today, I'm joined by the Director General of the European Space Agency, Josef Aschbacher. Thank you very much for joining me today. So, in recent years, the image of space travel has gained a reputation as a bit of a billionaires' boys' club. Do you think the private space industry plays an important role in the space industry globally?
Private industry will play a major role, but it is also clear that private industry will not succeed without public investments. Okay. Take the example of SpaceX. SpaceX being the largest space company today in the world, but they have